I'm in Konoha and I want to be Hokage. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Ring, South. In the valley, after everyone had escaped, the fierce demon statue behind Nagato also turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared without a trace. Without the demon statue devouring his energy, Nagato finally managed to hold on for a breath and fell to his knees with a thud. He looked like a bag of skin and bones, and was almost sucked to death on the spot. Konan and Yohiko hurried over and looked at Nagato distressedly. Konan's face was full of pain. Every time Nagato used this ability, he had to pay a huge price. Yohiko hugged Nagato, and he was so distressed that he couldn't breathe, and his face was covered with tears and snot. "He's not dead yet, why are you crying?" the clone scolded, and then added, "But if you hold him so hard, he will probably be sent away by you." After hearing this, Yohiko immediately put Nagato down in a hurry. "Clone, I studied medical ninjutsu for a while." He didn't say the rest, but the meaning was already very clear. Konan and Yohiko still had some hostility towards Shikato's clone. They had fought side by side because of their similar positions before, but now the enemy had all run away. It was obvious that the other party had its own purpose, and it could be said that they were not friendly. Just looking at Nagato, who was in great pain on the ground, Konan and Yohiko looked at each other, nodded to each other, and then stepped back 2 steps to make room for the clone. The clone came over, simply relieved Nagato's pain, and then used medical ninjutsu to treat him. Finally, his life was saved. Next, he needed supplements and a long rest. The clone looked around. "It's not safe here. Take him and go back to your Akatsuki base first." Outside the valley, there were originally more than 100 members of the Akatsuki organization, but now there were only less than 50 left. Most of their colleagues were killed in the ambushes outside. The scene was quite tragic. Yohiko, carrying Nagato on his back, closed his eyes in pain when he saw this scene. What the clone hates most is escaping and being weak. He lectured from the side, "Can you pretend it didn't happen just because you can see it? Open your eyes and see clearly. These colleagues have sacrificed for your ideals. Remember their faces, don't let their deaths be meaningless." The atmosphere at the scene was a little depressed and painful, and everyone's face was covered with tears. The clone didn't care, but increased his strength. "Speaking of which, when I heard about your ideal of seeking peace without force, I almost laughed my teeth off. Is this what Jiraiya taught you?" No one refuted this statement, because they had already paid the lives of nearly half of their colleagues for this ideal. The clone continued, because the words spoken at this time could make them feel the most. From the Six-Path Sage to the Senju Hashirama, none of the people who pacified the ninja world wars were weak. And none of them pacified them through dialogue. Remember, without the deterrence of force, there will never be true peace. Ninjas need to be respected. At the end of the clone's speech, he took a deep look at Yohiko, the leader of the Akatsuki organization. This kid was obviously not qualified, but he still added a sentence at the end. "The so-called peace is won through fighting." Such a plain sentence made almost everyone present feel deafening. At that moment, Yohiko seemed to be enlightened. And the whole person was struck by lightning and froze in place. Peace is won through fighting. In fact, it was not just Yohiko. Nagato, who was lying on Yohiko's back with a depressed look, was even more touched. Konan followed beside them. She did not have such great ideals as Yohiko and others, but she was willing to unconditionally trust and follow her friends. She quietly watched Yohiko and others being taught a lesson by a 4 or 5-year-old child without saying a word. "I always feel that this world is extremely wonderful." The group cleaned up the scene and returned to a base of the Akatsuki organization. On the ground not far away, a dark ball of special substance suddenly swam over, and opened its eyes. "So-called peace, is it fought for? Interesting guy. If my mother were here, maybe she would have something in common with him. But what's wrong with this guy? Is it someone's escape? Also, the guy next to Danzo is a little strange. Forget it, overall it hasn't deviated too far from the plan, just continue to observe." Wow. The black substance finished talking to itself, scattered into black liquid all over the ground, and gradually seeped into the depths of the earth. In the base of the Akatsuki organization, Nagato has been arranged to rest well. A group of people, including Yohiko, surrounded the clone, not tit for tat, but out of curiosity. Konan also asked the question that everyone cares about the most, who are you? The clone jumped from the crowd, jumped onto a pipe beside it, sat on it and said, my name is Ghost, Shadow Ghost, Shadow Ghost, Ghost Shadow? It doesn't even sound like a human name. Konan frowned, this name is obviously a lie. The clone took the initiative to say, I am very interested in your Akatsuki organization. If there's a chance, we may be able to cooperate. This time, I just happen to know the arrangement of Hanzo and Danzo, so I wanted to come and remind you. But after searching for a while, I didn't find any trace of you, and when I met you later, it was too late. So I had to resort to this last resort. Konan frowned, and then asked, how old are you? The clone was stunned. Do you care about this? Konan blushed unconsciously when she was asked, and remembered that she was taken advantage of by this little brat before, and she treated him as a child at that time, so she didn't care at all. But now it seems that this is not the case at all. So she naturally cares about the other party's age. The clone didn't rush to answer, but wanted to slowly get closer to them. But he soon felt that the original body seemed to be getting farther and farther away, and it seemed that it was following Danzo back. Danzo is really quick-witted, and he left as soon as he said he would leave. It's rare to come out, and he didn't say he would play for 2 days. This old man is really boring. So the clone could only speak quickly. He jumped down from the pipe and walked in front of Konan and Yohiko. I don't have much time. If you don't mind, please leave your contact information. Konan looked at the little hand stretched out in front of her, and her cheeks blushed again. The clone was slightly startled, then came to his senses and explained, it's not yours, it's from the Akatsuki organization, because maybe we will cooperate in the future. Konan suddenly felt that this little brat was not so cute. On the contrary, Yohiko, after experiencing this setback, especially after being taught a lesson by the clone, seemed to have matured a lot. He stretched out his hand and handed over 3 rings. This is something made with Nagato's ability. Originally, each of the 3 of us had one. But we can trouble Nagato later. As for you, choose one from here. It can be used to contact us even at a long distance. Just consider it as a thank you for helping us this time. The clone took a look at the 3 rings, which were engraved with Yan, Men, and Nun. They just corresponded to the names of the 3 people. Originally, he wanted to pick one at random. But wearing a ring with other men's names engraved on it was somewhat awkward. So the clone chose the ring with Nun engraved on it. Thanks, I want this one. Yohiko stared at him with dead fish eyes. This guy really has ideas about Zayanin. Zayanin also noticed this scene, but pretended not to see it and turned away. The clone didn't care about this little thing. He performed the summoning technique and summoned a sealing scroll. After sealing the non-ring into the scroll turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared again. The clone had a brief conversation with Yohiko and the others, and finally felt it, raised his head and said, it's almost done. Yohiko and others looked at him in confusion. I should go. It was just a spur of the moment, so I can't stay here forever. Yohiko gave him a complicated look. Although the 2 sides had been together for a short time and had a lot of friction, they didn't even know each other's true identity and purpose. But the clone saved them once, there is no doubt about that. He even taught them something the teacher Jiraiya had never taught them. Chapter 27 Kakashi, Throw More Punches. Seeing that the clone was about to leave, Zayanin hesitated for a moment, but finally asked with a slightly red face, how old are you? This question now entangled her like a demon in her heart. If it was a child, although this possibility was extremely low, but if it was really a child, then she wouldn't have to feel awkward about being taken advantage of by him before. And if it was an old man like Danzo, she might have some disgust in her heart, and it was a bit disgusting to be pretended to be young by an old man. However, if it was a young man, Zayanin stared at the clone, waiting for his answer with a little trepidation. The clone glanced at her. Oh, by the way, I was a little offended before, I'm very sorry. Zayanin ignored it and just continued to look at him. The clone saw that he couldn't change the topic, and had a headache for a while, but finally said, okay, let you see it. Then, in the shadow state, his figure gradually began to lengthen. In the stunned eyes of Yohiko and others, he gradually turned into a mature man. More than 1.7 meters tall, the curve of his body was very perfect, and his black hair was tied up behind his head and tied into a short ponytail. Judging from some parts of his back, he should not be too old, and can even be said to be very young. Yohiko and others stared at him intently, waiting for the clone to turn around, wanting to see his true face. At this time, the clone did not disappoint everyone. He turned around decisively, but there was a mask with flame patterns on his face, which was mysterious and people could never see through it. Yohiko and others were a little disappointed, but soon the clone put his hand on the mask. Gulp. A group of people swallowed their saliva with curiosity, and their expectations were full. The next second, the clone lifted the mask little by little, first revealing a young forehead, and then the phoenix eyes with a very stern taste. But only more than half of the corner of the eye was exposed, and the pupil was not fully exposed. The whole person suddenly turned into black lines all over the sky, and scattered away. Only the last words of the clone were still echoing in the air. What a pity, it's too far, it's the limit. Everyone, see you next time if we are lucky. Xiaonan was stunned. Even with her quiet temper, she felt like hitting someone at this moment. This guy definitely did it on purpose. He deliberately took off a small piece of the mask, and then suddenly disappeared. He has a bad personality. But he seems to be quite young. Xiaonan chuckled and said, I hope I can see you next time. Yohiko and others also realized that they were fooled. They were so angry that their faces turned red, but they could only punch and kick the air to vent their anger. Nagato, who was recuperating in the back, had already woken up. He walked out holding the pipe and said weakly, that guy should be from Konoha, but he doesn't seem to be in the same group with Danzo. Konoha? Well, it's probably a secret technique like clones. Clones? I can't tell at all, I'm just guessing. In any case, he is not our enemy for the time being. Yohiko, we have to replan the organization. Yeah, I know. We must not let our colleagues sacrifice in vain. Yohiko, Nagato, Konan suddenly felt a little redundant. The ANBU and the Root were on their way back to Konoha together. Danzo extended an olive branch to Kakashi. Hatake Kakashi, I have high hopes for you. You have the talent for darkness, and staying in the ANBU will only lead to your failure. You can show your talents in Saratobi's place. There is no stage suitable for you there. Come to the roots and protect the towering tree of Konoha in the darkness. The few remaining ANBU members in the group were frightened by Danzo's words of poaching in front of them. However, some people still plucked up the courage to stand up. Danzo-sama, this doesn't seem good. After all, Kakashi is a member of this hilly guards recruited by the Hokage-sama, and was trained as a shadow guard. Danzo turned his head. Are you questioning me? The senior in the ANBU immediately lowered his head, but said nothing, obviously agreeing. Shikato felt that it was time for him to show his ability again, and approached. Danzo-sama, he provoked you. Danzo stared at him with a dark face. What do you want to say? Shikato, he provoked you. Danzo, yes, he provoked you. Shut up. Yes, I am loyal to Danzo. Of course, Danzo could not just snatch the people from the ANBU. After all, the ANBU is different from other departments. The ANBU is directly under the Hokage and is the most valued organization by the Hokage. Obviously, it is not something that can be poached. Not to mention that it is Kakashi. Even Danzo can't go too far. However, a 12-year-old Jonin is still very attractive, not to mention that he is a genius with a Sharingan. Danzo obviously didn't want to give up directly, and turned to say, I heard that the Uchiha clan is putting pressure on you to return Obito's Sharingan. Kakashi's face sank. Danzo, join the Root. I will help you resist the pressure from that clan. Uchiha, don't dare to be presumptuous in front of me. Shikato looked at Kakashi through the mask. It is indeed as Danzo said, if Kakashi joins the Root. The Uchiha clan was not going to bother Danzo just for one Sharingan. They were worried that even if they got that one back, they would lose several more pairs for no apparent reason. Danzo's desire for the Sharingan was written on his forehead, and they were not blind. Kakashi lowered his head at this time. Thank you for your kindness, Lord Danzo. I have no intention of leaving the ANBU for the time being. I'm sorry. Shikato stood up again at the right time. Hatake Kakashi, if you don't accept my proposal, then you should drink the wine for punishment. Do you think you can refuse Lord Danzo? Kakashi looked at him. Why can't I refuse? Although I am very grateful that you saved me before, so what? I don't need others to decide for me about my affairs. Shikato, since you are grateful for my life-saving grace, I don't need you to repay me with your body. Just let me punch you lightly. Kakashi didn't hesitate at all. Okay, not to mention one punch. If you like, a few more punches will be fine. One punch is enough. Shikato shook his hands and did warm-up exercises slowly. I always felt that a little white-haired boy like you would cry for a long time if he was punched. The 12-year-old Kakashi looked at him stubbornly. I won't cry, enough. Danzo's eyes twitched and he interrupted Shikato's actions. He didn't want Konoha to lose a potential general. A few more punches? If Nara Shikato really wanted to throw a few more punches with all his strength, even the four-tailed beast would not be able to withstand it. If he really hit Kakashi with a solid punch, not to mention the 12-year-old Kakashi, even the 30-year-old Kakashi in his prime would still be beaten to shit. Although Danzo has a lot of little thoughts and no bottom line in doing things, the premise of all this is that he loves Konoha deeply. Secondly, it is the position of Hokage. Finally, it is Sarutobi Hiruzen. Well, the last one is ticked off. Danzo will not allow it to be exposed. Shikato withdrew his hand. He was just joking, although he really wanted to bully Kakashi. However, it feels more interesting to joke with a cold-faced Danzo. Shikato continued to entertain himself as usual. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 New Mission. In a secret training ground somewhere in the route. Wei Wuxi Chenzi Zhouyin. After quickly completing the seal, Shikato took a deep breath. Fire style, fire dragon flame bomb. Boom. The hot and bright flames swept past, like a dragon's flame that destroyed the jungle in front of him, and in an instant, it swallowed up nearly half of a small river in the distance. The river water was rolling, and the hot steam was steaming violently. Shikato was quite satisfied with the power of this technique, but it consumed a little chakra. With his current chakra amount, he would run out of chakra after performing it for dozens of times. During this period of time, Shikato had almost used it to improve the foundation of the 5 elements ninjutsu. As a result, his chakra amount began to increase exponentially, and it was almost the same every few days. Name, Nara Shikato. Gender, male. Age, 16 health points. 0 abilities, Haki, Armament Haki, top, 99%, Observation Haki, primary, 9%, Conqueror Haki, not yet activated, Ninjutsu, Yinsu, Shadow Manipulation Technique, top, 99%, Fire Tsu, intermediate, 31%, Lightning Tsu, intermediate, 32%, Water Tsu, intermediate, 30%, Sealing Technique, primary, 19%, Medical Ninjutsu, primary, 29%, Taijutsu, Konoha Taijutsu, primary, 29%, Jinjutsu, Konoha Jinjutsu, primary, 9%. If you count carefully, it has been almost a year since I joined the root department. The 3 attributes of ninjutsu have also broken through to the intermediate stage. With his current chakra amount, he is considered to be above the middle level among the Jonin. At least he didn't embarrass himself as a Jonin, and he despised Kakashi by the way. The successive deaths of Obito and Nahara had completely depressed Kakashi. This guy had been slacking off in the ANBU and was almost a dead fish. The Sharingan did not bring him a qualitative leap, but instead limited his upper limit. He often ran out of chakra before using a few ninjutsu. Many colleagues secretly gave him the nickname of Kidney West. After hearing about it, Kakashi tracked it down for a long time and vowed to find the person who spread the rumor and let him taste the secret of Konoha's physical skills that he had just learned. Shikato said it had nothing to do with me, I was just joking. As for how it spread, I don't know. During this period, Shikato was active in the root division for Danzo's mission and had not appeared on the front battlefield for a long time. However, the news of the battle report continued to gather at the root's intelligence management office. On the Cloud Ninja battlefield, the Cloud Village of the Land of Lightning was about to collapse. As a result, the Land of Earth was beaten back, but the Land of Water suddenly increased its strength from the previous small fights, and the 7 ninja swordsmen appeared one after another. The Land of Water seemed to have to prove that as one of the 5 great countries, it had the strength to match it. When the Third War was about to subside, it attacked Konoha with full power. This not only gave the hidden Cloud Village a big sigh of relief, but also made the old neighborwind country eager to try, as if they wanted to take the opportunity to bite off a large piece of meat from Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen suddenly felt his scalp tingling. After the battle fell into a long-term tug-of-war, Konoha's reserve combat power became increasingly insufficient. Every day, he had to worry about the new victims on the battlefield, and the pension was no longer enough. The daimyo of the Land of Fire expressed his dissatisfaction with him. On the battlefield against a mist ninja, it was time to send out the young generation, and even the newly graduated Jinan to deal with it. Fortunately, Konoha has always had a trump card in hand. A newly rising genius emerged from the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Shisu. At such a young age, he already possessed impressive strength. With the help of the powerful Uchiha, he was able to temporarily hold back the pace of the hidden mist village, but the battle situation was not ideal, and the situation became more passive day by day. As the war evolved to this point, even the 5 major countries had fallen into a state of exhaustion due to various reasons. It's just that everyone was fighting with their last breath and didn't want to lose, or didn't want to lose too badly. Training ground after Shikato practiced fire style, he was ready to continue to familiarize himself with lightning style and water style. But at this time, Danzo suddenly walked in from the entrance with his men. Following behind Danzo was his old acquaintance Aburame Ryoma, and the other person was a little unfamiliar. Judging from his height, he should be young. Is he a seed cultivated by Danzo? Lu, there is a mission for you to do. Danzo's words were as straightforward as ever, and he got straight to the point. The war is getting worse and worse. Sarutobi has never disappointed me in disappointing me. He really can't grasp the situation of the war. At this critical moment, I need you to stand up and make the name of Root famous for me. The war has entered a period of weakness and may end at any time, and the first thing to do after the war ends must be to settle accounts. The resignation of the third Hokage Sarutobi Hirozen is a foregone conclusion. On the one hand, the third war has dragged on until now, and the younger generation has been destroyed too seriously. This is a problem that cannot be covered up during the third Hokage's reign. On the other hand, the third Hokage is old. He almost stayed in the village throughout the entire Third Ninja World War and never went to the front battlefield. His influence has weakened a lot. Of course, there is another point, that is, the elders of Konoha and even the family forces are putting pressure on Sarutobi to force him to give up that position. After all, during the war, Sarutobi provoked many family forces in order to consolidate the power of Hokage, and took back a large number of key resources from them. This critical period will be the most important moment to compete for the 4th generation Hokage. Danzo decided to use his big move and directly sent out the most elite troops of the route to end this protracted ninja world war. By then, with his prestige, it will be easy to take down the identity of the 4th generation Hokage. Shikato said that there was no problem and agreed as straightforwardly as always. Okay, what do you need me to do? Danzo handed him a scroll. It contains the information of the frontline headquarters of the Hidden Cloud Village. There are about 12 Hidden Cloud ninjas there, including the confidant of the former 3rd generation Hokage, the commander-in-chief, Tsunade. These are handed over to you. Any questions? Shikato shook his head to indicate that there was no problem. Okay, after the chakra was doubled. The biggest change was that the upper limit of the shadow manipulation technique was greatly increased again. The top shadow manipulation technique, with sufficient chakra support, can be used to perfection. Although his physical skills were still relatively poor, his shadow manipulation skills made up for it, and he became more and more adept at assassination. Danzo pointed at the boy beside him and said, "He's A this time, he will cooperate with you. I will also send a special operations team." Shikato glanced at the boy and said, "No need. You know, I always like to be alone. If we really start fighting, I am worried that I can't take care of him." The boy opened his big black eyes and didn't blink like a ghost. "Senior, I don't need to be taken care of." Danzo also explained for him, he is a good player of wood release. Wood release? Oh, Yamato, no wonder he looks familiar. But Shikato still shook his head. Too young? Let him thrive for a few more years. It's not good to force the growth of a seed before it grows up. Yamato looked up at him and said in a flat tone, "Senior, do you want to try?" Danzo, don't underestimate the wood release of the 1st generation. I taught you the armor myself. Shikato glanced at him, then there's no need. He who is taught by Hashirama Senju can still be given a try. Don't you have any idea about what you taught? Danzo's face darkened. Who are you looking down on? After all, I am the 4th Hokage who is about to take office. Humph, forget it, I won't argue with you, a junior. Shikato said again, by the way, forget about the special operations team. Just consider it as my way of repaying the kindness of Lord Danzo and leaving more fire for the root. I'll work hard and chew this hard bone alone. Danzo narrowed his eyes. Can you do it alone? You'll know after you try. Shikato smiled. Just a dozen jonin, not a big problem. Chapter 29 today. The frontline headquarters of the cloud-hidden battlefield. Inside an open jungle, trees were cleared on a large scale and a relatively tall stone tower was built. Below, there were cloud-hidden ninjas busy at work, some submitting intelligence, and some issuing the headquarters orders. Occasionally, some wounded soldiers would be transported to other departments through here. On the periphery, there was also the cloud-hidden ninjas barrier class, which used barrier techniques to cover a large area of space, on the one hand to sense the enemy, and on the other hand to shield the enemy's perception-type ninjas. Deer Man lurked in the shadows farther away, making hand seals with his hands. Yin escape, shadow escape. The whole person gradually sank into the shadows, and finally disappeared completely. Then the shadow quickly shuttled across the ground, silently blending into the shadow of a cloud ninja, and took the opportunity to successfully avoid the perception barrier. After entering the barrier, Deer Man let go and began a ruthless hunting operation. Most of the people outside the tower were small fry or ninjas with serious biases, and the threat was not great. Shikato chose to hide in the shadows of the Kumagakure ninjas guarding the periphery one by one, and wiped out the outermost ninjas one by one. This cleaning process did not cause much change, and even no loud noises were made. After all, most of them were just chunin or shinin. The war was coming to an end, and most of the elite ninjas on both sides were killed or injured. Most of those who could hold the scene were at the forefront. This place was in a slack period, and with Danzo's intelligence, it created a good opportunity for Shikato. After the periphery was cleaned up, he stood at the door of the stone tower and immediately began to make seals with both hands quickly. Yin escape, shadow sealing technique. The dark shadow spread outward with Shikato as the center, and soon wrapped around the entire tower and quickly swallowed it. At the top of the tower, Toshiro was discussing the situation of the war and the next preparations with several captains of the Jonin class. At this time, a sense of crisis came over him. The sky outside the window seemed to darken at a very fast speed, and it was pitch black in an instant. Everyone be careful, seeing something was wrong. Toshiro was the first to react. He called the others over and immediately formed a seal. Lava release, Humo Jade. He spit out a yellowish-brown ball from his mouth, which enveloped himself and several other Jonin. Outside, Shikato saw that the tower had been completely enveloped by the shadow. Some people rushed out, but they were submerged in darkness before they could make much of a fuss. He formed a seal again. Yin release, shadow sealing technique, explosion. Bang! With a low thunder, the tall stone tower shattered into a black liquid all over the ground in the next second. When the black shadow became transparent, the uneven rubble ruins on the ground really stood out. On the ruins, there were many broken limbs and arms. There were bloodstains everywhere, and the scarlet blood directly dyed many stones red. Shikato clapped his hands and prepared to call it a day. But he found that a yellowish-brown ball was still standing there intact not far away. After the humoi dispersed, 5 elite Jonins of Kumagakure were revealed. The general commander, Toshiro, and the captains of 4 Jonin squads. Shikato was not surprised that there were still people alive, but just sighed. That ball-like thing is the lava escape? It should be said that they are worthy of being the elite of Kumagakure, and they are indeed not simple. Toshiro and the other 4 people were red-eyed at this time. At the front-line headquarters, there were about 50 regular mobile ninjas, including 12 Jonins, more than 30 Chunins, and less than 10 Genins. But at this time, there was nothing around the headquarters except for the ruins covered with rubble, and there was no one alive at all. In the farther warning area, some corpses could still be seen lying on the ground. The sudden intruder in front of him had obviously wiped out all the Kumagakure ninjas near the entire camp. After all, the 5 were elites, and they did not lose their minds due to anger. Instead, they warned each other, is it a ninja from Konoha? It seems to be someone from the Konoha ANBU. No, that's not right. The mask should be someone from the root, that bastard from the dark ninja world. The information of our headquarters has been leaked. We can't just let him go. While the few people were talking to each other, Shikato also looked around. It seems that only you have come out. Not bad. This is the first time I use this trick, and the effect is immediate for sneak attacks. Shikato stopped talking nonsense after he finished speaking. He formed seals with both hands. Fire style, fire dragon flame bullet. A blazing dragon of flame spewed out. Among the cloud ninjas, one took a step forward, a trivial trick, water style, water dragon bullet technique. The air was filled with water vapor, and a sparkling blue water dragon took shape in an instant, directly colliding with the flame dragon head-on. A large amount of water vapor rose up, and the field of vision gradually became narrower. A flash of lightning flashed behind the deer man. Under the cover of steam, a cloud ninja Jonin had already taken up a position. Cloud flow, 3 moon slash. Lightning flashed on the blade of the short sword, and 3 swords were slashed at the same time from 3 different angles, top, middle and bottom. In another direction, a vague figure also appeared. Cloud flow, rising dragon. A fatal sword attack, attacking from both sides at the same time. The deer man gave up one side and reached out to grab the cloud ninja on the other side. "I'll take your arm." The cloud ninja suddenly increased the force of swinging the sword, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. Clang. The explosion of metal and iron clashing, the strong recoil directly bounced the short sword away. At the same time, the deer man had taken the opportunity to grab the opponent's neck, and his knuckles exerted force, and his 5 fingers immediately sank into the flesh. The fragility of the human body was highlighted. Blood flowed from the mouth and nose of the cloud ninja, and his neck was twisted off. The whole person died in mid-air before he even hit the ground. On the other side, the long sword chopped at the deer man's neck, but it didn't leave any marks at all, just like cutting on steel. In the distance, another cloud ninja saw that the situation was not right, and directly threw up a lightning escape. Lightning escape, gratitude wave. A stream of water wrapped in jumping lightning arcs hit the deer man's back with a snap. It was just painless, just a little numb. He threw the dead cloud ninja away. He turned to look at another knife-wielding ninja. The other party woke up immediately, drew his sword and dodged several times in a row, pulling away a certain distance. Several cloud ninjas were a little surprised. What kind of monster is this guy? The slash was ineffective, and the lightning escape was like tickling him. On the ground, wisps of black shadows were like plankton, quickly rushing in multiple directions. Several cloud ninjas turned over flexibly and flew backwards, while raising their hands to throw out kunai with detonating talismans. A black whip sprang out from the shadow on the ground, rolled up, and tied up a kunai. Then it was thrown towards the Kumo ninja himself. When the kunai was in midair, the detonating talisman had already exploded. Smoke billowed. Deerman stood in place, forming a seal with one hand. Shadow escape. His figure once again escaped into the shadow on the ground. Under the cover of the explosion smoke, he quietly approached a Kumo ninja. When the other party realized something was wrong, it was too late. The hand knife covered with domineering power broke directly through his back and pierced through his chest. The battle was over in an instant. After pulling out his arm, a big hole appeared in the Kumo ninja's chest, and the whole person fell to the ground powerlessly. The shadow rolled on Deerman's arm, sweeping away the bloodstains. In just a few exchanges, 2 of the 5 Kumo ninja Jonins were gone. Toshiro's face was very dark. The intruder was unexpectedly difficult and dangerous. The most important thing is the opponent's ninjutsu, some of which are hard to defend against. Using the secret technique of shadows? Is it the Nara clan of Konoha? But I have never heard of such a terrifying genius in the Nara clan. After a simple fight, he has already judged that the current situation is not good. Fortunately, he has just used the secret technique to report the situation outside during the battle. Their headquarters has suffered such a great loss, so they must not let the other party leave, even if it costs a greater price to keep him. Chapter 30 The Suppression of Despair. Shikara noticed that the remaining 3 Kumo ninjas were still forming a V-shaped formation, surrounding him in the middle. He was a little surprised. "Aren't you going to escape? Or do you have the confidence to take me down?" A Kumo ninja said solemnly. "Don't be ridiculous. There is no word escape in the dictionary of the Kumo hidden village. Then your dictionary is a bit inaccurate." Shikara chuckled. "Forget it. Since you want to die, I'll grant your wish. Shadow escape." Swish. He escaped into the shadows again, as if he disappeared out of thin air, which immediately made the remaining 3 Kumo ninjas' scalps explode. What kind of ninjutsu is this? He can't even grasp the breath. Several people looked gloomy and looked at each other. When Shikarin's figure appeared again, he was less than half a meter away from the Kumo ninja on the far right. He jumped out of the shadow behind the opponent, holding a kunai in his hand, and stabbed the opponent's vest. The Kumo ninja caught a glimpse of Shikarin from the corner of his eye, and seemed to have a premonition, and shouted, "I've been waiting for a long time, Earth escape, Earth spear." The back of the cloud ninja instantly turned black, The surface hardened, and the body was motionless. At the same time, the Cloud Ninja on the other side had also completed the seal. Lightning release, lightning illusion, lightning pillar. A dazzling white light burst out, wrapping everything around. However, the deer man's Armament Haki is good at dealing with all kinds of fancy things. The kunai pierced through the hardened skin on the spot, and then pierced into the opponent's heart without stopping. Another Cloud Ninja Jonin was sacrificed directly. Although the Earth Spear is both offensive and defensive, it has a very high degree of hardening. But the kunai wrapped with top-level Armament Haki is not a vegetarian. It forcibly pierced through the defense of the Earth Spear and stabbed into the heart. After a successful attack, the deer man turned his head and looked at the Cloud Ninja who performed the lightning release. What was that just now? Was it a flash bomb? The defensive power of the Armament Haki is not to be underestimated. Even a powerful illusion is just a mental attack, and it is difficult to break the Armament Haki defense. Unless it is the same level, the deer man covered with the Armament Haki can be directly immune to most attacks. This is why Shikato was a little confused. Where did the other party get the confidence to shout out the long-awaited words? Just a flash bomb? So confident? With only 2 Kumo ninjas left in the field, Toshiro felt even more pressured. He had not intervened in the fights, just observing Shikato. But the result he got was somewhat disappointing. Strong defensive ability, immune to most attack methods, including illusions. Weird attack method, using shadows to change shapes, although the attack method is single, but the destructive power is extremely great. The defense of the Earth Spear is so strong that even steel cannot be cut, but under the opponent's kunai, it was as if it was made of paper and was easily broken. Such an enemy is somewhat despairing. After Shikato disappeared in the shadows again, Toshiro took a deep breath and reminded, pay attention to the shadows around you. The shadows he hides in are darker in color than other places. If this kind of monster sneaks in at night, the consequences are simply unimaginable. He must be left here. As Toshiro said, in the shadows on the ground, there is always a darker shadow that shuttles back and forth in the shadows at a very fast speed and at a high frequency. It is not easy to distinguish when it is not moving, but it is easier to see once it moves. However, when the deer man jumped out again, the Cloud Ninja still did not notice it, because it was right behind him, in a blind spot of his vision. Fortunately, Toshiro finally figured out some of the deer man's offensive methods. When the deer man just jumped out, he had already opened his mouth and spit out more a ball of cocky mucus. The deer man glanced at it and raised his hand to make a seal. Shadow escape. Bang! The mucus lost its target and hit the ground, sticking together. At the same time, right in front of Toshiro, the deer man jumped out of the shadows and kicked him. Toshiro still maintained a posture of performing ninjutsu, and had no time to dodge, so he could only clap his hands together. Molten escape, Humo. A cocky rubber-like thing appeared at Toshiro's waist and abdomen. The deer man covered the kick with the arm color domineering, as if kicking on cotton. But the powerful force still kicked Toshiro out. In mid-air, Toshiro turned over repeatedly and finally landed steadily. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but it was not a big problem. If it weren't for the gamo, he would be a corpse now. When the deer man attacked Toshiro, another Cloud Ninja quickly formed seals with both hands. Since the lightning escape is ineffective, let's try the fire escape. Fire escape, fire dragon bullet. The hot flames swept in. In an instant, the deer man was completely wrapped in it. The sky reflected by the blazing fire was a little red, and the heat waves were rolling. Did it succeed? The Cloud Ninja looked solemn and stared at the blazing flames. Until a human figure stepped out of the flames step by step, like a demon returning from hell, making him feel dry and suffocated. Fire escape doesn't work. The Cloud Ninja's face was already very ugly. The deer man walked out safely, even the corner of his clothes was intact. He looked around. It's still quite exhausting to use up all the Armament Haki, so let's make a quick decision. It's not that he couldn't hold on any longer, but this was the heart of the Cloud Ninja battlefield after all, and it would be easy to get into trouble if he delayed for too long. The deer man raised his hand and threw 2 kunai at the Cloud Ninja, and at the same time, he used his other hand to flick out 3 senbon slightly hidden. Then he pressed forward from the front. The Cloud Ninja took a deep breath and suppressed the panic in his heart. He quickly dodged the kunai and knocked out 3 senbon at different angles. He is indeed worthy of the title of elite. The deer man who rushed forward, as expected, hid in the shadows again. The Cloud Ninja was extremely alert. This time, the Deer Man still appeared at the side and rear. However, after the Cloud Ninja had a warning, he stomped on the ground and rushed forward, narrowly avoiding the Deer Man's punch. But as soon as he landed, he was already unable to move. Shadow imitation technique, success. The rhythm of the attack was linked one after another. If it was a one-on-one fight, there was no way to escape. A black line on the ground connected the two people together. The Cloud Ninja felt something was wrong. The black shadow on the ground began to spread upward along the body, and finally landed on the Cloud Ninja's neck. Shadow had neck binding technique. The Cloud Ninja's face turned purple, and it was already feeling more and more difficult to breathe. Naturally, Toshiro could not watch his colleagues being killed by the Deer Man. Although most of his ninjutsu were defensive in nature, he was an elite Jonin after all, and his own strength was not bad. Almost in the breath when the Deer Man attacked the Cloud Ninja, Toshiro had already taken the opportunity to spray a large mouthful of mucus. However, the black shadow on the ground stood up and formed a wall to block the mucus. Toshiro lowered his body and pulled out the short blade behind him. Although he was not good at physical skills, he was by no means shameful. Cloud flow, inside slash. A huge arc of white moonlight flashed by and went straight to the Deer Man's head. The moment the blade almost touched, a black shadow rushed out from the black shadow wall at the right time. Jumping out of the air, a child of about 5 or 6 years old spun in the air, and kicked out with great force in mid-air. Even though it was shorter, it still smashed the huge white moonlight into pieces, and at the same time kicked Toshiro, who rushed over more than 10 meters away. The shadow clone appeared again. When the clone fell, the Cloud Ninja had already suffocated to death. Now Toshiro was the only Cloud Ninja left. Moreover, Toshiro did not have time to use the lava escape to defend against the kick just now by the shadow clone. Even if the clone only has half the domineering level of the original body, it is not something that can be resisted by an ordinary body. The current situation of Toshiro is also not optimistic. Bleeding from the mouth and nose, several ribs in the abdomen were broken, and he could hardly stand up. The newbie is trembling. Please follow me and read it. Please try not to keep it during the new book period. Thank you. In the future updates, if nothing unexpected happens, I will update the 2 chapters together around noon. By the way, I would like to send you a belated blessing. Chapter 31 The Cruelty of War in Kiribi. The Deer Man dispersed his shadow clones and looked at Toshiro, who was unable to move. The other party seemed to have prepared himself for death and had no fear at all, so he didn't say much. I have used both lightning and fire styles, so I will give you a water burial. He formed seals with both hands. Water style, water break wave. A high-pressure water line sprayed out. Toshiro's pale face showed no fear. But after noticing the direction of the sweep of this water-style ninjutsu, he struggled to form seals again. Lava style, Humo Jade. Strangely, the Humo Jade was not blocking Toshiro in front of him, but behind him. The impact of the water break wave was so great that a blood hole as big as a small ball was pierced through Toshiro's waist and abdomen. Judging from the position, he was almost certain to die. But he still turned his head with effort to look back. After penetrating Toshiro, the water break wave pierced through the boulder that Toshiro was leaning against, and then collided with Toshiro's lava style. The elasticity of the Humo Jade caused a huge obstruction to the water break wave. The Humo was continuously stretched by the impact of the water droplets until it was dragged and pulled out a vertical column impact, completely shattering a part of the ground, and finally completely offset the impact of the water wave. However, with the collapse of the broken ground, a slightly larger underground camp space was finally exposed. Deer Man walked over, took a look, and was stunned. Under the ground, there were pairs of eyes that responded to him with silent anger and fear. The wounded, the children. This is the secret hidden under the frontline headquarters of the Cloud Ninja. Because this war has been going on for too long. The intense war that has been maintained for several years has not only produced one ninja glory after another. There are also countless disabled people and children who are forced to go to the battlefield. The medical camp has long been unable to accommodate them, but the insufficient reserves of ninjas on the battlefield have prevented them from easily withdrawing from the front line. They must be prepared at all times to meet the wave after wave of attacks from Konoha. As a result, underground medical clinics need to be established one after another under each camp. While healing the wounded, they can also replenish the battlefield combat power at any time in an emergency. If the land of water had not suddenly increased its strength in the final stage, the land of lightning would have been unable to hold on. Like Konoha, the hidden cloud village has also been injured by this war. However, in this situation, it is just a competition of who can hold on longer. So now, no matter which side, they are eager to end the war so that the village can rest and recuperate. But at the same time, they don't want to be the loser, and they are struggling to hold on. Dear Man looked down. In the underground camp, dozens of wounded ninjas and more than a dozen children looked at him with anger and fear in their eyes. The wounded ninja, dragging his tired and painful body, pulled the young child who had to go to the battlefield behind him, forming a silent human wall together. In this way, the child and Dear Man were separated, and they looked at each other from top to bottom. Not far away, Toshiro finally broke out. Even though he was fatally wounded and should not have been able to stand up, he suddenly rushed forward. Stay away from them. The broken short blade chopped the left side of Shikato's head. Shikato didn't even feel the pain under the cover of the Armament Haki. This attack was so fragile. Shikato waved his hand to knock Toshiro away, and then looked down at the camp below again. He was thinking about how to deal with these people. To be honest, he had killed many enemies on the battlefield, and many of them were not even enemies. But when he really faced the disabled and children in the underground camp, especially when those people's eyes revealed anger, fear, or pleading, facing these injured ninjas who were protecting the children behind them, Shikato was indeed a little hesitant. Toshiro supported his broken body and stood up again, as if he wanted to buy a little time for those children who had become Jinan in a hurry, and wanted to continue to attack Shikato. But he couldn't do it anymore, because he was already dead. Bang! Toshiro fell to the ground without a breath. In the underground camp, the wounded gathered their courage and continued to confront Shikato. The children who had become quick-trained ninjas were trembling in fear. Most of them were around 7 or 8 years old, and the oldest was only about 10 years old. Shikato stared down. A kunai slipped out of his sleeve and was held in his palm, with a hint of cold light flashing from the blade. The wounded were pale, their condition was already bad, not to mention the strength shown by Shikato was despairing. Standing in front of him was just a little obsession in their hearts, wanting the children behind them to live a little longer, even for a second. Your opponent is me, a dark-skinned white-headed kid suddenly shouted loudly. He held a short knife in his hand, with the tip of the knife pointing directly at Shikato, but his tone was trembling as he spoke, and he was obviously very scared. The wounded on the side hurriedly pulled him back. Daru, retreat. This is a battlefield. Before we die, it's not your turn to fight. The black boy is very stubborn, don't joke. I'm also a cloud ninja. Swish. A flash of cold light flashed, and a line of blood flowed from the side of the black boy Daru's face. A kunai was deeply nailed into the ground. For a moment, the atmosphere was extremely solemn. The Dear Man suddenly laughed at this time and looked at the black boy below. Hey, your name is Daru, right? Daru was about 7 or 8 years old. He mustered up his courage, but he was still trembling. No, that's right, you are quite interesting. Remember that you owe me dozens of lives, kid. After the Dear Man finished speaking, he turned around and left. He had completed the task of destroying the frontline headquarters of the cloud-hidden mountain. As for those children and the wounded, forget it, just let them live. He rarely chose to be merciful. However, at this moment, it seemed that he could no longer decide whether to leave. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Several figures passed by at high speed from a distance. The leader was a young man wearing dark sunglasses, a cloud ninja for a protector, and a dark complexion. What was more eye-catching was that he had 7 short blades on his back, and on his right shoulder there was a ward iron representing the iron armor seal. There was no doubt that this was the 8-tails Jinchuriki of the hidden cloud village, Killer Bee. Accompanying Killer Bee were his 2 disciples, Mabu and Samu. Both were about 12 years old. One had a slightly dark complexion and light gray hair, and the other was different from most of the hidden cloud ninjas, with snow-white skin and golden hair. As soon as the 3 landed, Killer Bee had already noticed the situation of the headquarters with almost all the dead and wounded, as well as the underground medical clinic that had been exposed. Fortunately, the injured and children in the clinic were safe, which made him feel a little relieved. After noticing the Dear Man who was turning his back and preparing to evacuate, he stretched out his hand and made a very unique rap gesture. Look at what you have done. You have harmed my friend, and you still want to escape like this? Idiot. Bastard, dear man, terrible speaking style. After Kirabi finished speaking to the dear man, he whispered to Samu and Mabu, you quickly take the people in the medical center and retreat away. Leave this to me, the dear man sighed, it's rare for you to show mercy. At least let me leave before showing up. This makes me look stupid, Kirabi, what nonsense are you talking about? But you are really stupid, idiot, bastard. He spoke a weird rap, but in his heart he had already discussed with the eight-tailed cow ghost. The eight-tailed cow ghost reminded him, this guy is weird, be careful, I always feel that he is very dangerous. Yeah, I know. Hey, are you really listening to what I said? Cow ghost, you are so long-winded, forget it, you will know when we fight. Chapter 32, Blow Up the Tail. The deer man stood there quietly. But the cow ghost and Killer Bee felt that the masked guy in front of him was becoming more and more dangerous. The eight-tailed cow ghost couldn't help but remind him again, be careful. The deer man in front of them suddenly sank into the shadows and disappeared. Before Killer Bee could be surprised, the deer man jumped out from the shadow beside him without any warning. Armament Haki covered. The man twisted his waist in midair, stretched his arms to the extreme and punched down in the next moment. Pop! The air seemed to vibrate with an arc-shaped ripple. Killer Bee's reaction was indeed fast enough. Even in a passive state, he was able to draw his sword and shoot. The lightning chakra wrapped around the blade, and the blood-red-tailed beast coat instantly appeared on his body. The tip of the knife rushed straight to the deer man's fist. There is no doubt. Killer Bee obviously underestimated the deer man. His sword shattered at the touch, and the lightning escape was unobstructed, like paper. Fists collided, and the blood-red boiling chakra coat had almost no effect. The fist bones were instantly deformed, and the 5 fingers were completely twisted. At the same time, the arm was broken, and the whole person was like a cannonball, and was punched away by the deer man. After continuously crashing into more than a dozen huge trees and smashing a stone, Kirabi finally stopped 100 meters away. Wow! Opening his mouth and spitting out a mouthful of blood, Kirabi looked at his twisted and deformed right hand, shocked and unbelievable. The cow ghost in his body also felt the force of the punch, and immediately became serious. How are you? Kirabi endured the pain and continued to maintain his rap style. It's okay. That bastard is really weird. He used his left hand to straighten the twisted finger bones and twisted the shoulder bones. There was no way to fix the fracture for the time being. The cow ghost, tail beast, there was a tacit understanding between the two, and the chakra coat on the surface of the body immediately turned scarlet. The 8 black and red tails behind him swayed. There was no sign of a human being on his body, and he was crawling on the ground like a wild beast. Bang! The next second, the ground shook and a violent gust of wind was created, and the half-tailed beast Killer Bee rushed over at an extremely fast speed. Too fast. At this moment, the disadvantage of the deer man in speed was immediately exposed, and he could hardly see the figure of Killer Bee. Before he could make any move, the deer man's abdomen was hit by a scarlet beast head. The terrifying impact force, even with the hardening of the armed color, it was difficult to remove the shock wave. The whole person was directly knocked away. After crashing into 3 or 5 large trees, the scarlet beast disappeared again in his sight when the deer man was in the air. Bang! This time it was the side face, and it was hit by the scarlet beast's paw and deviated. But this time, a series of black shadows jumped up from the ground at the same time, wrapped the scarlet beast's paw, and trapped the half-tailed beast Killer Bee for a moment. Although it was only a moment, the deer man also took the opportunity to slap it with his backhand. It felt as comfortable as hitting a ball. Killer Bee, who was like a beast, was slapped in the face and slid on the ground. Bang, bang, bang. After the continuous impact on the ground, Killer Bee stood up with a grunt. Turning around, he saw that after being hit by a headbutt and a punch, Deer Man stood on the ground again, and his condition seemed to be almost the same as if he had not been injured. Killer Bee's eyes almost popped out. The opponent's punch and palm were so strong that the 8-tailed beast in his body couldn't bear it. As a result, his counterattack was like tickling the opponent. Killer Bee and Gyugui were a little angry. As a Jinchuriki, how could he suffer such grievances? He raised his head and ejected the tailed beast ball without condensing it. The black and purple tailed beast ball formed a strong energy beam, which directly plowed a huge gully in the direction of Deer Man, and exploded violently in the distance. The explosion was like an earthquake, and the faces of Samu and others who had been hiding far away turned pale. Is this the tailed beast ball of Teacher Killer Bee? Dust was flying. Killer Bee looked around and didn't find any extra figures. "B, don't look for it, it's in front," the cow ghost reminded him. In the rolling dust, a human figure was becoming clearer and clearer as the dust gradually dissipated. Gulp. Killer Bee swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This guy, Deer Man raised his hand to block in front of him, and his clothes were still intact. But there was a very obvious wear and tear on the palm of his hand. Is this the tailed beast ball? Deer Man looked at his palm. The top-level Armament Haki didn't completely block the core penetration of the tailed beast ball. It was really terrifying. This was the first time he was injured in the true sense, and he was injured after being covered by Armament Haki. According to this power, it is likely that he will not be able to withstand 3 consecutive tailed beast balls. 10 shots will ruin his hand, and 100 shots will also ruin him. However, the premise of this is that he has to passively take continuous beatings. Deerman is obviously not that stupid. After initially trying the power of the tailed beast ball, he probably has a rough idea in his mind. Although Killer Bee was shocked that Deerman cheated and caught the tailed beast ball with one hand, he continued to fight back immediately. There is nothing that cannot be solved by one tailed beast ball. If there is, then another tailed beast ball. The terrifying black and purple energy beam illuminated the entire forest again, and the earth was once again deeply plowed to leave a huge long burnt mark. But this time Deerman was obviously not prepared to take it hard. His body disappeared into the shadows and suddenly emerged from the right side of Killer Bee, who had transformed from a half-tailed beast. Killer Bee turned his head and had another tailed beast ball ready in his mouth. The 8 tails is so arrogant. The black and purple sphere condensed but did not explode. It sprayed out on Deerman's head the moment he appeared. Deerman responded with the greatest sincerity, abandoning the large amount of Armament Haki that covered his entire body, and covered his fist with most of the Armament Haki. Bang! After a punch. The tailed beast ball was actually shattered by a punch before it exploded. Then the irritable fist landed on Killer Bee's side face, but at the last moment, a huge brown octopus tail stretched out and blocked the fist. Bang! The octopus tail was smashed into pieces on the spot. And the 8-tailed cow ghost's miserable wailing seemed to come from the soul. Immediately afterwards, the half-tailed beast transformed Killer Bee's side face was deformed by the punch, and several teeth flew out. The man was beaten and rolled on the ground for dozens of times, and finally stopped after the ground was smashed into pits. Killer Bee got up, pulled his chin and twisted his dislocated chin with force. Touching his mouth, the right molars and the incisors on the upper jaw were all gone, and his mouth was cold when he spoke. The head was buzzing with pain. This punch was really too scary. If it wasn't for the emergency, the 8-tailed Jayuki used his tail to block for him. Even with the tailed beast's outer garment, his head would have exploded. Until now, the Jayuki is still wailing inside him. This time, one of his tails was really blown up. Although it can be condensed later, it will take time. The most terrifying thing is that the monster in front of him has no obvious weaknesses. Killer Bee felt that he couldn't withstand a few more punches, and the situation would get worse if he continued to fight. Chapter 33, Successive Appearances. While Killer Bee was feeling the huge pressure, a voice suddenly rang out in the field. "B, you've been slacking off in your training." It was the new generation AI who had been designated as the 4th Hokage. He rushed to the battlefield here urgently through the unique Shinsung Jutsu of the Hidden Cloud Village. After seeing the current situation, he reprimanded Killer Bee. Deer Man frowned. The opponents arrived one after another, and it seemed endless. And the people who came were getting more and more difficult. There was no way. Who made him the frontline Kumagakure headquarters of the invasion this time? Now even if he wanted to pull a helper to share some of the pressure, he couldn't find one. Of course, ordinary helpers are just a burden. It's better to act alone. He looked around, but saw that Killer Bee had withdrawn from the beast form of the half-tailed beast, and returned to the human form of the tailed beast coat. On the other side, AI, who had just appeared, burst into blue lightning arcs all over his body, and the chakra gushing out was almost visible to the naked eye. The two blocked Deer Man in front and behind. The next second, the two attacked at the same time. Lightning release, absolute thunderblade. 2 figures, one red and one blue, flash by. So fast. Deerman frowned, because he dislikes speed-type ninjas the most. Bang! After a loud noise, a rather funny scene appeared. AI put his right arm on Deerman's left shoulder, and Killer Bee put his right arm on Deerman's right shoulder. The ultimate move, that should have been a sharp and unmatched twist of the opponent's head, became the two brothers enthusiastically hugging the shoulders of the older brother. Capital embarrassment, Dearman glanced at his side, with a trace of haze in his eyes. Hey, brother, you are a little too enthusiastic, right, brother? AI was slightly puzzled. Dearman didn't waste any more words, and just as he was about to take action, Killer Bee immediately shouted, "Big brother, be careful," but he didn't need to remind him at all. AI had already flashed and pulled a long distance away from Dearman. In the lightning release chakra mode, the speed was dazzling. He even pulled Killer Bee with him, he was so willful. AI patted Killer Bee on the shoulder. "No wonder you can't take him down, Killer Bee, brother, this guy has no flaws except that he is a little slower in speed. Even the tailed beast ball can hardly hurt him." "Humph, you also said almost." AI has a bad temper. He perfectly inherited his father's hobby of lifting weights and has extreme confidence in his physique. But he really can't withstand the tailed beast ball. Not to mention him, even his father, the third Hokage, doesn't dare to take the tailed beast ball head on. As a result, he met a tough guy now, and he was quite unconvinced. "Humph, I don't believe he can keep this defensive state all the time." He hit the mark by accident, and he was right. Dearman really can't cover the Armament Haki all the time. Doing so will consume Haki too quickly. Even the top Armament Haki can't stand this kind of play. "Forget it, I won't play anymore, I'm going to leave." If we continue, we may encounter a situation similar to the third Hokage. If we are attacked by the Kumagakure ninjas, we will be in trouble. Armament Haki cannot withstand long-term consumption. Dearman immediately chose to escape into the shadows, sneaking in the shadows at a high speed, preparing to evacuate the battlefield. Killer Bee had no way to deal with this scene. But AI had received the information handed over by Tode before his death, and his eyes swept through the dark shadows moving at high speed. The azure chakra erupted all over his body, and AI disappeared instantly. When he appeared again, AI had already jumped into the air, with his right foot raised high. Righteous Thunder Fury Axe. The right leg mixed with violent thunder fell from top to bottom, and rushed straight to a black shadow on the ground. The ground was crushed by a foot. Dearman had to jump out of the shadows, frowning. Looking at this situation, he couldn't get away without dealing with this fourth Hokage who was designated. Although Dearman hates speed-type ninjas, not all speed-type ninjas are worthy of his fear. Apart from AI, there are really few people who can force him out of the shadow escape form. Thinking of this, he simply stopped. The Ushiki in Killer Bee's body suddenly felt trouble. "Oh no, this guy is not going to run away, Killer Bee, that's better. My brother and I are powerful and will just keep him." "Idiot, bastard, eight-tailed Ushiki, don't be silly. He ran because he was afraid of your brother's speed, it has nothing to do with you. But he didn't run because of your brother's speed. In this case, your brother is still not giving up. He's going to kill you first and then continue to run, Killer Bee, he can't do it, idiot, bastard, are you talking without leaking anything?" Killer Bee was silenced by the Ushiki's words. There was nothing he could do. His teeth hurt. AI said to Killer Bee, "You should act according to the situation. Just use the tailed beast ball, and don't pay special attention to me." He was confident that he would be able to escape unscathed with his lightning speed before the tailed beast ball exploded. After the two agreed, AI exploded with all his strength, and began to attack Dearman at a speed as fast as thunder. AI's speed was indeed terrifying, and it was completely impossible to catch it with the naked eye. As a result, Dearman had to keep his whole body covered with the Armament Haki at all times. Now he regretted not improving his observation Haki. Bang! Thunder abuse level. Bang! Heavy flow explosion. Bang! Thunder explosion bomb. Bang! Thunder abuse level. Bang! Thunder dragon explosion. Dearman stood there like a muggle, and could only stand and passively take the beating. He couldn't see AI's figure clearly throughout the whole process. Although he had the Armament Haki defense, he was still beaten up and down. His sight couldn't catch up with AI's movement speed at all. No wonder this guy can be said to be comparable to Minato Namikaze in terms of speed. This speed is simply unreasonable. After the furious 10 consecutive hits, AI retreated and took a breath. As a result, the Dearman fell from the air, stood firm and said provocatively, "That's it? Well, I can still hold on, use some strength." Upon hearing this, AI's lightning chakra mode exploded instantly, and his hair stood up. With a roar, the whole person disappeared at a faster speed. When he appeared again, He had rushed to the back of the deer man, and on his slanted hand knife, the blue lightning arcs were crackling. The lightning abuse level Chiomai. Boom. The deer man dragged his feet on the ground, and the whole person was swept away by a blow, plowing 2 deep marks on the ground. Finally, he stood firm and patted the corner of his clothes. Well, the strength is good. It just happened to be itchy, and it feels good to scratch. AI's face became darker, and he continued to explode on the spot, and another set of consecutive punches. Deerman was hit by the lightning-fast attack, and his whole body seemed to float in the air. He had been looking for an opportunity, but he could not catch the corner of AI's clothes. Until a certain moment. AI suddenly shouted, "Now!" Then his figure disappeared in front of Deerman like lightning. From the angle behind, Killer Bee's long-prepared chain of tailed beasts was finally condensed. In the half-tailed beast form, scarlet horns have grown on his head. The black and purple-tailed beasts gushed out, and it was a chain of critical hits. Deerman raised his eyebrows. It was too late to dodge. The field of vision has been directly submerged by the overwhelming tailed beasts. The black and purple light column rushed straight into the sky, reflecting the sky in black and purple. Chapter 34, Counterattack. After a long while, the chain of tailed beast balls finally ended. It erupted more than 30 tailed beast balls. This was the 8-tailed Gyuki. If it was any other tailed beast with fewer tails, it would have stopped long ago. Even so, after Killer Bee erupted, the whole person instantly withdrew from the tailed beast, completely restored to human form, and knelt weakly on the ground. The 8-tailed Gyuki was panting heavily inside him. It was so tiring. The Gyuki stuck out his big tongue, and it seemed that he was a little powerless. 30 consecutive times, it's gone, it's really gone. If this still can't kill that guy, then, watch out. B. A golden chakra chain suddenly sprang out from the embers in the sky and headed straight for Killer Bee. Killer Bee raised his head with great effort, and just as he was about to dodge, his feet suddenly softened, his body staggered, and he almost fell to the ground. AI also reacted slowly after realizing it belatedly. It was impossible to evade with Killer Bee, so he subconsciously dodged at high speed and blocked Killer Bee with his body. The golden chains immediately wrapped around AI's body, binding him tightly. Brother, Killer Bee's face changed drastically. Under the faint embers of the black and purple-tailed beast Jade, Deer Man walked out covered in blood. The top-level Armament Haki couldn't withstand 30 bursts. The first 10 were fine, but the last 20 were a bit painful. It seems that I have to find a way to continue to upgrade the Armament Haki. I was actually injured. Sure enough, I'm not tough enough. Deer Man wiped the blood oozing from his forehead. Because of the pain, the smile on the corner of his mouth was a little far-fetched. He had more than 100 wounds of all sizes on his body. This was the first time he was injured like this. Staring at AI who was bound by the diamond seal and Killer Bee who was weak. Deerman exhaled a rare breath of relief, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he became solemn and dignified. Hey, did you guys enjoy fighting just now? Although he had been letting them fight harder before, it was because he couldn't catch AI that he couldn't fight back. No one likes to be beaten passively all the time. Even if it doesn't hurt, they will get bored. What's more, he was hit by 30 consecutive tailed beast balls. AI has been trying to break free from the diamond blockade. Breaking it violently is effective, but it can't be broken in a short time. It takes a certain amount of time to buffer. Deerman obviously didn't plan to give them too much time. The villain died because he talked too much? He was resentful after being beaten again and again. You like to beat people, right? You like to pretend, right? You like to spray tailed beast balls, right? Then come and try my fist. The diamond blockade tightened suddenly, and AI was pulled down by the chain and forced to fly towards Deerman. The little domineering power left was covered on his fist. Deerman took a horse stance, exerted force on his waist and abdomen, twisted his waist and abdomen into a twist, and stretched his arms with force until they reached a limit distance. Armament color, cover. Clenched fist. Hit. Deerman's long-prepared punch was thrown at the moment when AI flew back. AI's face changed drastically. He felt that if he was hit by this punch, he would definitely die. He tried to make a final burst and break free from the diamond blockade. But the blue chakra arc exploded, but he still couldn't get out. At the last moment, he simply prepared to close his eyes and die calmly. Ninjas have always been like this on the battlefield, even the Hokage is no exception. But at the last second, a scarlet figure shot over. The pale exoskeleton appeared on the surface of the body, and at the same time, several brown octopus tails wrapped the person around, and finally blocked AI's eyes. Boom! The deafening explosion sounded throughout the jungle. An extremely terrifying arc-shaped shock wave, with a deer man's feet as the core, swept towards the surroundings. Gravel, grass, trees, river water. Everything visible to the naked eye was suddenly swept away in an instant. Several layers of the ground nearer were scraped off, and the ground farther away also rose and fell like waves, completely soft. A huge sinkhole appeared under the deer man's feet. Dust rolled like smoke. The deer man wanted to confirm whether AI and Kirabi were dead or not, and if they were not dead, he would punch them again. Although the probability of death was higher, the deer man was really annoyed by the beating before. However, he soon noticed that more and more strange auras were coming out from all around, some strong and some weak, but the advantage was that there were enough numbers. The deer man sensed his physical condition. Now his condition was very bad, and his armed color domineering was almost exhausted. His chakra was okay, but his body was seriously injured, not just the bloody appearance. The 30 consecutive tailed beast balls had also caused a huge shock in his body. He could endure until now because he was suppressing his anger and wanted to vent it. A haze flashed across Shikato's eyes, and he spat a mouthful of blood foam on the ground. He forced his body to escape into the shadows and disappeared before the large-scale arrival of the Cloud Ninja Army. Shikato ran very timely, because not long after the Cloud Ninja Army arrived, another Jinchuriki of the Cloud Village, Yuzuki, also appeared on the battlefield with agility. If he didn't run, there was a high probability that he would not be able to escape. In front of the ruins, Yuzuki arrived in time, and the surrounding Cloud Ninjas immediately retreated respectfully and made way. Standing at the edge of the cenote, looking at the huge cenote with rolling dust, Yuzuki's pupils shrank, and she looked around. Where are AI and Killer Bee? Where are the others? The Cloud Ninjas all shook their heads. After they arrived, they didn't see anyone here. The tailed beast Madara in Yuzuki's body suddenly spoke up. Yuzuki, the 8-tailed bastard is lying on the ground. Tisk, tisk, how miserable, who beat him like this? He's almost dead. Tisk, even if he wants to recover, it will take at least several years. Yuzuki didn't care about Madara sarcastic remarks. The relationship between the tailed beasts was not good to begin with. But after hearing Madara reminder, she was still shocked to look at the place covered by dust under the deep pit. The 8-tailed beast is under there? What a joke. Yuzuki used chakra to blow away the dust, and finally revealed two figures under the pit whose life and death were unknown. The 8-tailed Jinchuriki Killer Bee and the designated 4th-generation Hokage. This scene shocked all the Kumo ninjas present. The two people below were really too miserable. Jinchuriki Killer Bee maintained his human form, but starting from the right shoulder, nearly half of his body was beaten away, and his whole body was covered in blood. It was even more unknown whether the people were alive or dead. AI, who was below Kirabi, was not in much better condition either. His strong body from lifting weights had collapsed, his right arm was folded in half, and his face was covered in blood. His breathing was extremely weak, and it seemed that he would die at any time. This scene brought unprecedented shock to all the Kumo ninjas present. The top strong man in the village was beaten into such a horrible state? Who did it? Yuzuki was the first to react, and shouted anxiously, "Where's the medical department? Come over quickly." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35: The So-Called Next Life. The deer man dragged his tired and wounded body, shuttling at high speed in the shadows. He quickly avoided the most dangerous area and came to a remote jungle. After the deer man jumped out of the shadows, he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He rubbed his chest vigorously, and there was a trace of depression on his face. The injury was more serious than expected. He had to rest for a while and get some treatment. The deer man leaned against a huge stone, and the shadow enveloped him. He raised his hand and placed it on his abdominal cavity. The green chakra began to flow along the surface of the body, activating the cell tissue at the wound and accelerating the recovery process. While treating, he vaguely heard a little movement, frowned, and looked away. Dozens of injured cloud ninjas, supported by a dozen children, walked out carefully. Is it them? These people were the group of people in the underground treatment center of the Cloud Ninja frontline headquarters. Before, he and AI and Kirabi took turns fighting, and these people withdrew a little further with the help of Samu and Mabu. Later, because the aftermath of the battle was too intense, they retreated again and again, and finally breathed a sigh of relief after retreating very far away. As a result, after resting for a while, they saw the figure that made them unforgettable. However, the other party seemed to be seriously injured and was lying under a stone. His whole body was covered in blood, and he seemed to be too weak to move. So, they plucked up the courage to come out. Shikato frowned slightly, but he didn't intend to pay too much attention. The strength of these people is very limited, and the strongest ones are only at the level of Chunin, and they are still disabled. He planned to take a short rest and leave immediately. Even if they went to inform, it would be too late. So Shikato just glanced at them and didn't care about them anymore. But these injured people and children didn't seem to think so. He seems unable to move, he must be seriously injured. After all, it was Lord Kirabi who did it. He's not moving. Was he beaten to death? Humph, Lord Toshiro was killed by him. He deserves to die. He also killed the Site shinobi, and Lord Tetsuai. Kill him, kill him. Vicious words kept flying out of the mouths of these wounded and children. Some children even picked up stones on the ground and threw them at him. It's just that the distance was far, so they didn't hide him. Shikato probably heard some of it, but he just frowned and ignored it. Words are always the most powerless thing, and what they said is right. He did kill a lot of Kumo shinobi. But so what? The battlefield is like this. He never regretted it, nor did he regret letting them go before. Shikato was still concentrating on healing his wounds, and he didn't plan to waste time on these people. At this time, a small figure rushed out of the crowd again. Daru still held a short blade in his little hand. Just as he had pointed the tip of the blade at the deer man before, he once again pointed the tip of the blade at the deer man. He took a deep breath and mustered up his courage. I'm going to kill him. Daru, don't, Daru, come back, don't go over there, Daru. Previously, the group of people only dared to talk and curse the deer man from a distance, but few of them really dared to get close to him. When Daru rushed out, they were too late to stop him. And they immediately tried to dissuade him anxiously. Daru swallowed his saliva and moved closer to the deer man step by step. He held his breath and stared at the motionless appearance of the deer man. He turned a deaf ear to the advice of the seniors behind him, and it seemed that only the deer man's head was in his eyes. It seemed that the surroundings were silent, and the little Daru's breathing became more and more rapid. The closer he got, the greater the pressure he felt, and the short blade in his hand trembled a little. He stood beside the deer man, watching him still lying on the ground with his eyes closed. Daru summoned up his courage and finally raised his short blade. At this moment, the others also stopped breathing, and fear and anticipation filled everyone's heart. Daru! Don't! In the distance, a strong call woke everyone up from their dreams, and they suddenly realized that they were already sweating from nervousness. Samu and Mabu came back with several water bottles. Seeing that the situation was not right, they threw the water bottles hanging on their bodies aside and rushed forward. After getting close to a distance, they stopped for a fear of stimulating Daru too much. She held her breath to dissuade Daru. Don't, Daru. Listen, Daru, put down the knife and step back step by step. She didn't feel pity for the deer man, but she keenly felt that the other party was just too lazy to pay attention to them, and the injury might not be as serious as they imagined. It is best for both parties not to disturb each other. Although Samu also hated the other party for killing so many of her predecessors and colleagues, this was the battlefield, and she had already understood a lot at a young age. The battlefield had always been so cruel, and there was no right or wrong. Mabuai also followed her, nervously pulling at the corner of Samu's clothes, and also whispering to dissuade Daru. Daru was stunned. Why did Sister Samu plead for the enemy? He shook his head, not understanding it, but when he turned around and saw the deer man's embarrassed face, he raised the knife again. No, I want to kill him and avenge Lord Tudai. Samu was very nervous. No. Daru, the battlefield is like this, don't talk about revenge. Don't forget, he let you go once before. As soon as these words came out, Daru paused for a moment, but only for a moment. He was very determined at a young age. Do you owe him those dozens of lives? Humph, then I will pay him back in my next life, or the next life after that. After gritting his teeth and saying it word by word, Daru finally stopped hesitating this time. The tip of the knife went down and stabbed the deer man's eyes. Samu closed his eyes in despair, and Mabu also had a premonition that something was wrong. The injured and the children were excited at this time, as if they really thought that Daru could kill the terrifying monster. The moment the tip of the knife fell, a black shadow of a 5 or 6-year-old boy jumped out of the shadows. Bang! The shadow clone kicked Daru and sent him flying more than 10 meters away. Blood gushed out of his mouth and nose, and his chest collapsed. The deer man opened his eyes, sat up and leaned against the stone. He turned his head to look at the chattering group of injured people and children, who were already stunned by fear. Then he looked at Daru, who was holding his stomach and vomiting. At this time, there seemed to be a trace of dust buried in his eyes, filled with gloom. That's a good thing to say. I'll pay you back in the next life? Okay, kid, I really admire you. I'll fulfill your wish and send you to see the next life. Kill them all. Daru's last sentence of I'll pay you back in the next life annoyed the deer man. The deer man did not regret letting them go before, and he was not even very angry about their revenge on him. But Daru's words of I'll pay you back in the next life completely took the deer man's rare mercy for granted, which was what he hated the most. Under the control of his murderous intent, the shadow clone rushed directly into the crowd like a wolf into a flock of sheep. Even though his domineering power was almost gone, the shadow clone's skill level was still at the level of a Jonin. The killing power against these cloud ninjas was terrifying. Samu and Mabu wanted to rush up to stop them, but they were kicked one by one and were kicked away. The slaughter lasted for less than 3 minutes, and the only cloud ninjas present were Samu and Mabu, who looked desperate and as if their pupils had lost their color. Daru, who had become the 5th Hokage in the future, was beaten to death by the shadow clone without exception, and was sent to see his next life in advance. Deer Man stood up with his scarred body, turning a blind eye to the misery around him. It was a rare opportunity for him to show mercy, and even God didn't agree. He glanced at the dazed Samu and Mabu, and told the shadow clone, "Take them with you, let's go." Chapter 36 Influence in Captivity. Deerman made a big fuss at the frontline headquarters of the Hidden Cloud Village, which had a huge impact. Originally, the Hidden Cloud Village could hold out for a while in this war, and even the final victory or defeat with Konoha was still unknown. As a result, after this incident, it announced its withdrawal from the war at the speed of light and wanted to make peace with Konoha. The news released was that the Root Department of Konoha sent a mysterious force to attack the frontline headquarters, resulting in heavy casualties in the headquarters. On the front battlefield, AI and Killer Bee have been in a stalemate with Minato Namikaze, and the situation on the battlefield is somewhat passive. In addition, the village urgently needs a new Hokage to preside over the overall situation. In the end, the Hidden Cloud Village, which has always been strong and domineering, rarely announced its withdrawal from the war in advance and wanted to make peace with Konoha. The specific conditions need time to be polished a little bit, but the Hidden Cloud Village really can't fight this time. After all, they know their own situation well, and the real situation of the village is much worse than the news released. The designated 4th Hokage was seriously injured, the 8-Tails Jinchuriki was on the verge of death, and the frontline command was almost wiped out. In addition, the 3rd Hokage in the village also died before. This series of changes caused the Hidden Cloud Village to be unprecedentedly weak. They did not surrender directly, but just held on. Sarutobi Hiruzen finally breathed a sigh of relief, because if the fight continued, Konoha would also go bankrupt. The middle and young generations suffered heavy casualties and needed a long period of rest and recuperation. And on the other side, there was a land of water waiting for them. Hiruzen and Sarutobi wanted the Hidden Cloud Village to take the initiative to shake hands and make peace. Otherwise, with the aggressive attitude of the Hidden Cloud Village, if Konoha gave in, it would suffer heavy losses in the negotiations. Now that this is the case, the initiative is in his hands. Without the Hidden Cloud Village, there is only the land of water that has been in civil strife for many years, which can no longer be a big deal. If they are given a hard time, they will basically be honest. However, Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned at the key reason that led to this result. When did Danzo's Root Department have such a powerful guy? Is it Orochimaru? Forget it, now is a time of trouble, let's end this war first. Konoha's Root Department can be said to be a hit. Although the Hidden Cloud Village has never mentioned the specific casualties, it can be seen from the fact that they were forced to end the war. The dark of the ninja world brought more than just a pain to the Hidden Cloud Village, but a bloody lesson. Danzo didn't expect that Shikato would be so perfect and stunned the Hidden Cloud Village in one go. He was still expecting what surprise Shikato could bring him, but the surprise he brought him was so huge. When Shikato returned to the root department, he brought him another surprise. Danzo looked at the two Kumo ninja girls tied back by Shikato with a dark face. They were both around 12 years old, and their looks were really good. One was black and the other was white, and they also had their own characteristics. They were obviously beautiful embryos. But he was very dissatisfied with the dear man's private decision. What are you doing again? You have been doing more and more small actions recently. I can understand that young people like to play, but don't bring them here. Samu and Mabu were a little afraid of Danzo. After all, the name of a man is the shadow of a tree. The darkness of the ninja world is so terrifying. The two were forced back by the dear man. It's not that they didn't try to escape, but they really couldn't escape. The strange clone like a child could always catch them back. In the end, they could only lie dormant temporarily and choose to follow this terrifying man honestly. Hearing Danzo's words, the two turned pale, then looked at the dear man, and felt a little panicked. This guy looked very serious along the way. He wouldn't really have that idea, right? Shikato said, Danzo-sama, you misunderstood. I am a serious person and will never do those improper things. He pointed at Samu and Mabu and said, two very good seedlings. If they are left to the Cloud Ninja, it would be an aid to the enemy, so I thought it would be better to bring them back. However, what he valued more was Mabu's Tensao technique. Shikato had no hope for the Flying Thunder God technique for the time being, so he could only get in touch with Mabu's Tensao technique first and use it for research. Unlike the Flying Thunder God technique, which requires a mark, the Tensao technique is a teleportation technique without any teleportation restrictions in principle. The defect is that it is not as flexible as the Flying Thunder God technique. I don't know if it can be improved. We had communicated on the way back before. The Tensao technique is Mabu's family secret technique, something passed down from generation to generation. According to her, it must not be passed on to outsiders, but this is not a problem for Shikato. As for Samu, it is an accessory, but her talent is indeed good and her qualifications are very high. She can be cultivated as a small Tsunade. Of course, he didn't plan to say these words to Danzo. After all, he wanted to bring the two back to keep them for his own use, not to give them to Danzo. In the original Naruto, one of them became the secretary of the 4th Hokage at a young age. The other was an outstanding elite Chunin, and it was impossible for her not to have some outstanding abilities. Of course, the more critical point is that they are very pleasing to the eye. Shikato didn't want to be disturbed by too many miscellaneous things, and he just needed 1 or 2 assistants to help with some daily chores. He simply captured them back. But he was not at ease leaving them outside, or leaving them in the Nara clan. The 2 little girls who had just been captured still had a lot of little thoughts. So Shikato brought them directly to the root department, so that they couldn't run away in a short time. Danzo glanced at them. It's not that he favors men over women, he really doesn't like women. Now he only has eyes for Sarutobi Hirozen. Since you are afraid of helping the enemy, why not kill them? Danzo's words were very cold, making Samu and Mabu nervous. Dearman shook his head. It's a pity to kill them. Danzo sneered. You said you didn't want to play with them? Humph, even you can't escape the restless hormones. Dearman's reaction was within his expectations. Young people can understand it. After all, everyone has been young. He glanced at Samu and Mabu again. Black and white? They play it quite colorfully, compared to when I was young, Pa. The world is going downhill. Even the heroes of Konoha who walk in the dark have begun to degenerate. Sarutobi, this is the Konoha you lead. Sure enough, let me do it. I will correct the decadent atmosphere of Konoha. The young generation must start from childhood. Danzo warned Samu and Mabu again, and then listened to Dearman's brief report on the details of this trip. After all, no one knows whether the hidden cloud village has concealed anything, and the parties involved know more. Dearman explained the general situation. There is no doubt that all the frontline command headquarters, including the Toshiro, were killed. As for the situation of the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki and AI, Shikato did not mention it, because he did not know whether the two were dead or not. However, in order to reduce his threat, he only said that he escaped from the hands of the 2 of them, and did not mention the battle between the 2 sides, which happened to be basically consistent with the news deliberately concealed by the hidden cloud village. Danzo nodded, instructed Shikato and handed over a detailed mission briefing, and finally said, "Go down and rest. You did a good job this time. Thank you for your hard work." Although Shikato had been cleaned along the way, he had many injuries of varying sizes on his body, and it was impossible for him to recover in a short time. Danzo could see that his injuries were not light, so he finally comforted him. Shikato expressed his gratitude. "Thank you for your concern, Danzo." Danzo nodded and left. Even if Shikato was a guarantor, Samu and Mabu would not be accepted by the root in a short time. If they were to follow Shikato, they would inevitably come into contact with a root, so they would be given the tongue trouble root severance seal. It was just a special mercy, allowing them to enter and exit freely in certain places. For this purpose, an abandoned underground base was set aside for Shikato, which was a little remote and not very big. According to Danzo, it was to give Shikato a place to hide his beloved, and more importantly, to prevent the news of the root from spreading out, and not to keep outsiders in the root. Finally, Danzo also warned Shikato that he was the one who guaranteed Samu and Mabu, and if there was any betrayal of Konoha in the future, the responsibility would be on him. Shikato nodded and accepted it. It was nothing. At worst, he would destroy the flowers when the time came. Chapter 37, Jonin Meeting. After the Hidden Cloud Village in Konoha shook hands and made peace, only the Hidden Mist Village was still entangled with Konoha in the ninja world. Not long ago, a 10,000-year-old Jonin of Konoha, Might I, suddenly exploded on the battlefield. One person not only blocked the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Hidden Mist, but also killed 4 on the spot, and the remaining 3 also fled with serious injuries. It can be said that the battle shocked the entire ninja world and completely wiped out the shock brought by the root department. Although the 7 ninja swordsmen are the first generation, they have been formed for a long time. During the second generation of Mizukage, they have been intentionally cultivating the ninja swordsmen. As a result, the reputation of the 7 ninja swordsmen has long been spread, especially those legendary ninja swords with their own characteristics. As a result, such a group of people who are called Mist Ninja Monsters were more than half destroyed by a 10,000-year-old Jonin of Konoha in one battle. It is shocking, but also a bit daunting. How many such Jonins are there in Konoha? Fortunately, after defeating the 7 ninja swordsmen of Konoha, the Konoha Jonin died of exhaustion, giving Kirigakure a break. But at this point, Kirigakure was already struggling. It was not as good as Konoha in all aspects, and there were still a lot of troubles to deal with in the village. As a result, 4 of the only 7 ninja swordsmen that could be shown off were crushed by a Konoha Jonin. The strategic ally, the Hidden Cloud Village, negotiated with Konoha in advance, which made Kirigakure a bit of a muggle. After gritting their teeth and holding on for another half a month, they finally couldn't hold on any longer and chose to withdraw from the front line and slipped away without a word. Konoha couldn't catch up because the boats didn't work. They could only watch the Kirigakure ninjas of the Land of Water leave one by one. So far, the Third Ninja World War has finally come to an end. The 5 major countries began to close their doors silently and lick their wounds. Konoha Ninja Village held a meeting of the Jonin today. The topic of the discussion was to elect the 4th Hokage. Before the war, Konoha Village had nearly 400 Jonins, but after the entire Ninja World War, the number of Jonins dropped sharply to less than 200. Dozens of them were disabled and retired, so that at this stage, there are only a little over 100 Jonins left in Konoha, which shows how tragic the situation is. More than half of the most elite Jonin troops were lost, and the number of victims of Chunin and Jonin on the battlefield was already countless. It can even be said that every family was in mourning, and the elderly sent off the young. Under such circumstances, Sarutobi Hirozen's life was naturally not easy. Soon after the war ended, Sarutobi Hirozen took the initiative to abdicate and announced that he would officially start electing a new 4th Hokage to take over. The election of Hokage was of course not elected by the villagers, but by the top. On the one hand, the daimyo of the Land of Fire had the power of decision, and on the other hand, the Jonin, elders, and advisors in the village had the power of nomination. The village decides on the candidates, and the daimyo selects the right person to be the Hokage from the list of candidates. A total of 97 Konoha Jonins came to this Jonin meeting. There were also more than 40 people who were absent for various reasons, or entrusted their friends or family to vote on their behalf, or some families gathered together. In the huge conference room, nearly 100 Konoha Jonins sat in a circle. Shikato, wearing the mask of the root, followed Danzo into the room. Danzo's boss aura was still strong, especially since the root had caused such a big hotspot recently, and its reputation was very popular. As soon as he entered the conference room, the originally noisy discussions in the entire conference room suddenly quieted down. Including Danzo and Shikato, there were a total of 6 Jonins from the route. There was no way, the route was established late, and most of them were still in training, and they were still a little young. But there were originally more than 10 people, but after the war, 4 were lost. Although the routes were not really on the front lines, the espionage and assassination missions behind the scenes were equally dangerous. Danzo took the lead and sat in the elder seat, with the route members standing in a row beside him. After sitting down, Danzo turned around and looked at Shikato, who stood up again. "Where are you going, Shikato?" "Danzo-sama, I'll sit with my brother for a while, and help you get votes." Danzo glanced at him and didn't answer, which was considered as tacit consent. The seats at the scene were basically divided. The Jonins huddled together for warmth, each sitting next to or not far from the candidate they supported. However, there were also many Jonins who remained neutral. The Uchiha clan and the Hyuga clan were the most obvious examples. The people of the 2 clans gathered together. They not only remained neutral, but also had their own little thoughts. Shikato walked through the crowd and came to the seats of the 3 families of Ino, Shika and Joe. The 3 families sat together around the couple of Minato Namakes. Noticing a route coming over, they were more or less curious. "Hey, long time no see, brother." Shikato raised his hand and greeted him. Nara Shikato made room for him. "I knew it was you, kid. Did Danzo let you come?" "Ah, Danzo, he's pretty easy to talk to. You're probably the only one who describes him like that." After Shikato sat down, Akemichi Choza and Yamanaka Inoichi, who were beside him, were also acquaintances and greeted him. Minato Namakes, who was in the middle, also turned his head and said, "Long time no see, Shikato." "Long time no see." Shikato nodded to him, then asked, "How's it going, senior? Do you have a confidence?" Minato Namakes scratched his head. "Confidence? This kind of thing is quite troublesome. I can only try my best to strive for it. But you, is it really okay to sit here? Danzo seems to be staring at you all the time." Shikato looked up, and Danzo was indeed staring at this side, especially when he was talking to Minato. He stared even more closely. So Shikato raised his hand and made a V sign. Danzo closed his eyes with a dark face. "Ha ha ha." On the side, Kushina couldn't help laughing. She greeted Shikato through Minato. "You are Shikaku's brother, right? Nice to meet you. I'm Uzumaki Kushina. You're so awesome just now. You even dared to tease Danzo. I'm always scared every time I see him." Namake's Minato glanced at his wife. "You should change your name. Namake's Kushina is so nice." Kushina swung her fiery red ponytail. "Oh, it's been more than 20 years, I'm used to it." Namake's Minato smiled at her lovingly. "Shikato, I'd better go back." "Shikaku, what's wrong? Someone is giving out dog food here." "I'm full." "Be serious, Shikato." While chatting, the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen came in with his 2 friends Utatane Kaharu and Mito Kato N. The Konoha Jonin present stood up instantly. "We still have to respect the Hokage." Sarutobi Hiruzen waved his hand to signal everyone to sit down, and then he also took a seat next to Danzo. The route really helped a lot this time. Danzo snorted. "Sarutobi, Konoha is not just your Konoha, I am also a village elder after all." Sarutobi nodded with satisfaction. "Yes, I know. You have also been working hard for this. Thank you for your hard work." Danzo was a little uncomfortable with Sarutobi's sudden comforting tone. The 2 of them usually said 3 sentences and then 2 sentences, and finally added that "you will regret it," and then slammed the door and left. "What's wrong with Sarutobi today?" Danzo frowned and fell silent. Sarutobi was sincerely thanking his old friend. This time, forcing the Hidden Cloud Village to withdraw from the war in advance really helped him a lot. Chapter 38 Heroes and Scum. After taking his seat, Sarutobi Hiruzen coughed lightly, attracting everyone's attention to him. He spoke in a slightly low voice, "Where the leaves of Konoha dance, the fire will also continue to grow. The flames will continue to illuminate the village and let new leaves sprout. This is the spirit of fire that Konoha has been passing down since the founding of the 1st generation." Sarutobi Hiruzen took a deep breath and said emotionally, "The purpose of calling everyone here today must be clear. As the 3rd generation Hokage, I will step down as the Hokage of Konohagakure and entrust this heavy responsibility to the next one. I hope that the successor, or everyone in office, will not forget the inheritance of the will of fire." There was some silence in the meeting room. When it really came to the moment of resignation, Sarutobi Hiruzen was somewhat relieved. He had sat in the third generation's chair for too many years, and that responsibility and inheritance had been urging him not to take it lightly. He was old, and maybe it was time for him to retire. Sarutobi Hiruzen glanced at Jiraiya, who was sitting not far away, and Orochimaru on the other side, feeling a mixture of emotions. Finally, he retracted his gaze and said, "Then, please speak freely and nominate the best candidate in your mind who is qualified to sit on the seat of the fourth Hokage." As soon as the words fell, the entire huge conference room suddenly became chaotic. All kinds of noisy voices were disturbing. Bang! Danzo slapped his hand on the table and said with a dark face, "Be quiet, you are all the last remaining Jonin in Konoha? Don't you know any rules? Come one by one." Danzo's words were very powerful, and the noise immediately quieted down. A group of people looked at each other, and no one dared to speak first. At this time, a hand suddenly stretched out from the crowd. Danzo glanced over there, and his brows immediately frowned. "Stand up and speak." Dear man touched the mask on his face, and then pointed at himself. Can I recommend myself?" In the conference room, you could hear a pin drop. Are all the people of the root so brave? Does this count as discrediting Danzo in person? Danzo's face turned black. "It's fine that you didn't canvass for me, but you played tricks in the voting?" Sarutobi Hiruzen coughed. "If I remember correctly, you should be that one." Dearman nodded immediately. Yes, I am the one you mentioned. The scumbag you defined as abandoning his partner. I didn't expect you to still remember me. It's really an honor for a scumbag like me." Sarutobi Hiruzen opened his mouth when he heard it, but he never said anything. He never expected that someone would start to attack him as soon as the meeting started. Sarutobi Hiruzen had used some not-so-bright methods to weaken the influence of his family. He originally wanted to seize the opportunity to redistribute the power and resources in the village. Restrict the separatist situation of the family and force some families to redistribute the monopolized resources, so that it would be more conducive to the healthy development of the village. Just like the will of fire he just described. Sarutobi Hiruzen hopes that everyone will consider the overall situation and take the interests of the village as the ultimate interests, rather than being limited to personal gains and losses and family compromises. So he will not regret this matter. Sacrifice the small self to achieve the big self. In his opinion, it is not wrong. Sarutobi Hiruzen was silent, and subconsciously wanted to smoke a cigarette, but then he remembered that this was a formal occasion and he did not bring a pipe this time. However, his silence does not mean that others will be silent. As a role model of the Sarutobi clan, Sarutobi Hiruzen will never allow anyone to stain him with mud, not to mention that Sarutobi Hiruzen is his father. Sarutobi Shinizuke slammed the table. "Can't those who abandon their partners for the mission be called scum?" As soon as he said this, the three families of Ino, Shikoku and Joe were all a little unhappy. "Don't you know what the specific situation is?" Shikato glanced at him. "Who are you?" "Konoha Jounin, Sarutobi Shinizuke," Shikato said. "I've heard of your name. You are one of the 12 guardian ninjas who stayed in the residence of the Fire Country daimyo during the war. It is said that you are a very powerful Konoha Jounin. It's a pity that you didn't get a stage to shine." "What a pity." Sarutobi Shinizuke was immediately annoyed when he heard this. This was a blatant mockery of him for being a coward. But before he could get angry, Utane Kaharu slammed the table hard, giving him a way out at the right time. "Quiet. How can you be so noisy? Do you think this is a place?" Shikato raised his hand to signal. "Well, I have one more thing to say." Utane Kaharu didn't like Shikato, who caused the dispute, and said impatiently, "Are you done yet?" Shikato raised a finger. "Just one word, isn't it?" Utane Kaharu snorted, turned his head away in anger and ignored him. Shikato's eyes swept through all the people present. His elder brother was tugging at his clothes, signaling him to behave himself. Namake's Minato also looked at him curiously. He actually had some good feelings for Shikato's straightforwardness, but he was more curious about what Shikato wanted to say. Sarutobi Hiruzen said nothing, and neither did Danzo. Shikato said, "Shinizuke Jounin, I have only one question to ask you." Sarutobi Shinizuke's face darkened. "Just say it if you have something to say." "I don't want to waste time with scum." Shikato smiled. "I want to know, in your mind, is Hatake Tsukumo, who gave up the mission and chose a partner, a hero or a scum?" Boom. After saying this, the entire conference room seemed to be struck by lightning and fell into complete silence. Almost everyone was staring at Shikato in astonishment. How dare this guy ask such a question in front of the Sandaime, the advisors, and the elders? Sarutobi Shinizuke was also stunned. He opened his mouth several times, but he could not say the word hero. If you say Hokage Tsukumo is a hero, then almost the entire village was slandering him. Throughout the whole process, none of his father, senior advisors, or elders stood up to defend Hokage Tsukumo, or even suppressed public opinion. Otherwise, Hokage Tsukumo would not have been forced to death by public opinion. As a result, it was not until Hokage Tsukumo's death that everyone seemed to wake up, and public opinion rebounded all of a sudden. It was just that it might be because the blackening was too big before, resulting in Hokage Tsukumo's matter. Even if the public opinion turned, it was only spread in a small range, suppressed by people with ulterior motives, and covered up without too much discussion. If this matter was not tacitly approved or even fueled by his father and senior management, even Shinizuke himself would not believe it. To say that he is a hero is to deny his father and the senior management in the village. But if he said that Hokage Tsukumo is a scumbag, how could he say that? Because in his mind, Hokage Tsukumo is indeed a hero. What's more, he just denied the negative example of Dearman, and then turned around and denied the other side. Isn't this a contradiction? At this moment, there was actually another person in the field who was gritting his teeth and staring at the back of Shikato. Hatake Kakashi never expected that he would actually talk about his father in such a place. He also didn't expect that even at this point, no one in the entire conference room had spoken a few simple words. Hokage Tsukumo is a hero. Kakashi felt that the things he had always believed in were beginning to shatter, and his eyes were slightly red. Hokage Tsukumo is a hero. These 7 cold words were lightly uttered by Shikato, but they were loud and clear. There is no doubt about this. After hearing this thunderous sentence, Kakashi immediately stared at Shikato's back. Chapter 39, Hokage Tsukumo is a hero. From the moment Shikato came over, Kakashi felt that this guy was a little familiar. After hearing what Minato and Shikoku said, he immediately realized that this guy was the former Shikato of Nara. Moreover, he should be the root member who saved him in the Hidden Rain village. All these made Kakashi have a better impression of Shikato, and when Shikato said the words that had been suppressed in his heart for a long time, Kakashi suddenly had an impulse to die for his friend. His father, Hokage Tsukumo, was a hero. There was no doubt about this. Because not long after his father Hokage Tsukumo died, he was arranged to be buried in the Hero Mausoleum of Konoha, and the 4 characters of Konoha Hero were clearly engraved on the memorial tablet. But in private, he had never heard anyone affirm his father. Even when talking about the heroes of Konoha, he had never heard anyone mention his father's name. So was his father a hero? Sometimes, Kakashi would also wonder, but since Obito and Rin died one after another, Kakashi never thought about it again. He realized that his father, Hokage Tsukumo, was his pride, his lifelong pride. After Shikato said this, there was a brief silence, and then Utane Kaharu immediately stood up and shouted angrily, "Nara Shikato! You have to understand your identity. Whether Hokage Tsukumo is a hero or not is not something you, a Jonin, can decide." Mitokado Anya said with a gloomy face, "Nara Shikato, do you know what you are talking about?" On the contrary, the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen closed his eyes with a sad face. Hokage Tsukumo was a hurdle in his heart. Danzo stared at Shikato, and now he was not angry. He wanted to see what tricks this kid was going to play. Shikato didn't care about Utane Kaharu's scolding, but asked back, "I'm not qualified, but Utane's advisor must be qualified to make an evaluation. Then you tell me, is Hokage Tsukumo a hero?" Utane Kaharu was choked by this question, and her face was red. Mitokado En was annoyed. "Enough. Nara Shikato, now is not the time for you to make trouble. Now we are nominating the 4th Hokage. What do you want to do?" Shikato ignored him, but repeated again, "I say, Hokage Tsukumo is a hero." Mitokado En stood up suddenly, and was about to get angry, but was dissuaded by the 3rd Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen opened his eyes, his face full of fatigue. "Let him talk, I want to hear what he says." Danzo glanced at Sarutobi, snorted and closed his eyes. "It's meaningless to bring up the past. He is just a dead man." But he didn't obstruct anything. Shikato stood up, smiled and said, "I said Hokage Tsukumo is a hero. In fact, many people think so in their hearts. It's just that most of them can't say it out loud. After all, it was you who slandered and blamed him in the beginning." Many people in the meeting room lowered their heads. To admit him is undoubtedly to deny yourself in the beginning. It's not too difficult to admit others, but it's very difficult to deny yourself. However, no one can deny a person's achievements. Konoha White Fang, that was a more famous name than the three ninjas in the beginning. His contribution to Konoha is far more than the loss caused by abandoning a mission. Even if that loss was indeed shocking, it even made Konoha feel pain. Shikato raised his head and looked at the Sandaime Hokage. But so what? Did he do something wrong? Of course, saving people is not wrong. And there is nothing wrong with giving priority to the mission. This kind of thing is not right or wrong at all. Hero? Scum? It's just the self-righteousness of the peacemakers. Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't look at Shikato, but lowered his head and kept thinking, did he do something wrong? When the incident with Hokage Tsukumo happened, Sarutobi Hiruzen's first reaction was to blame Tsukumo, because the loss of that mission was too great. Originally, the important mission was given to Tsukumo, which was his trust in Tsukumo, even more than his three disciples, but Hokage Tsukumo disappointed him. The mission failed, the village suffered heavy losses, and the lives of many people were greatly affected. This is why there were so many people in the village who complained about Tsukumo during that period. After all, it affected the vital interests of too many people. Even Sarutobi Hiruzen complained about Tsukumo's failure more than once. Yuta Tenkaharu and Mito Kato and even asked him to order Tsukumo to be sent to prison to punish his mistakes. As for Danzo, it was even more direct. Danzo didn't have so many fancy ideas in his mind. He directly proposed that Tsukumo commit suicide to apologize for the huge loss of the village. There were many criticisms, and Sarutobi Hiruzen was also mentally unbalanced during that period. It was really that the village paid too much for that incident. For a time, the village's senior leaders were all frowning all day long and trying to find ways to deal with the subsequent impact. And when he reacted a little, Hokage Tsukumo committed suicide. Sarutobi Hiruzen never thought that such a man would commit suicide because of public opinion. This was beyond his expectation. Afterwards, he kept asking himself why it had developed to that point. He withstood the doubts of others and even the blame of the daimyo, and forcibly sent Hokage Tsukumo's body to the hero's mausoleum and engraved his name on the memorial tablet. He felt that this should be considered an explanation to Tsukumo, and he finally felt better in his heart. After many years, he didn't expect that someone would tell him about what happened in a formal place again. Is Hokage Tsukumo a hero? Sarutobi Hiruzen may have had some doubts before, but later he gradually became certain of this. It's just that he didn't have the courage to say it out loud, because that would be denying himself, and announcing to everyone, the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, was wrong. He never had the courage to say it, but now someone has said it for him. Sarutobi Hiruzen felt relieved. His personality was like that, many decisions needed others to push him before he could make up his mind. His courage has been worn down a little bit with his age. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a deep breath, and raised his eyes with a slightly turbid look. Unlike others, he set his eyes on Hokage Kakashi, who was not far from Namokaze Minato. Kakashi, after the third Hokage spoke, the entire conference room was silent again. Hokage Kakashi raised his head with red eyes. The third Hokage said in a heavy tone, as Nara Shikato said, "Your father Hokage Tsukumo is a hero of Konoha? No doubt, wow." After this sentence was spoken, the conference room exploded instantly. With the Sandaime Hokage's recognition, the emotions weighing on everyone's heart regarding Hokage Tsukumo were now vented. Sarutobi Shinosuke also looked at his father in surprise. Sarutobi Hiruzen seemed to have aged. He said with a sigh, "It's my fault. I was too focused on the interests of the village and never noticed your father's abnormality, which put him at the center of public opinion. When I came to my senses, Tsukumo had already left. I'm sorry." He stood up and bowed deeply to Kakashi with a slightly hunched body. Kakashi could no longer hold back his tears. The Jonin in the conference room were also deeply moved by this scene. Only Shikato was still watching coldly, and in his heart he gave the Sandaime 2 words, showmanship. The Sandaime is really a showman. Chapter 40, Danzo-sama takes the lead. No matter how sincerely Sarutobi Hiruzen said, and how sincere and heartfelt his repentance was, he even bowed his head and admitted his mistakes to the teenage Kakashi, but in the end, it was still the same old story. Sarutobi Hiruzen still insisted on letting others sacrifice their small self for the greater self. It is to make people selflessly dedicate themselves, give up personal and family interests, and make concessions for the interests of Konoha? the so-called will of fire. As for whether he can do it, Shikato doesn't know. Anyway, he requires others to do it. And the case of Hokage Tsukumo is a negative example. Because Hokage Tsukumo chose to sacrifice the greater self for the smaller self. This is completely contrary to Sarutobi Hiruzen's philosophy. Although he apologized very sincerely and seriously, he may indeed have regrets. After all, he didn't expect Tsukumo to commit suicide. But if such a thing happens again, with his personality, it is likely to be the same result. Regret is regret, but you still have to do what you should do. In the final analysis, the concept of Konoha supremacy has been deeply rooted in Sarutobi Hiruzen. The death of Hyuga Hisashi and the extermination of the Uchiha clan, these major events that occurred during Sarutobi Hiruzen's reign, the fundamental reason behind them, were all for the peace and stability of Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen retreated step by step and finally chose to sacrifice the ego. Hyuga Hisashi is the ego, and the Uchiha clan is also the ego. In the present, Shikato is the ego, and Hokage Tsukumo is of course no exception. It's just that Hokage Tsukumo violated Sarutobi Hiruzen's philosophy, so he died. Strictly speaking, this philosophy is actually very high-sounding, and there is no right or wrong. But Shikato doesn't like it, because he doesn't want to be that ego, otherwise he doesn't know how he died. In the final analysis, it's just that his own strength is not good enough. Otherwise, when the strength is reached, what is the big ego and the small ego, it's still what you want. Shikato looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen's emotional statement with cold eyes, and he didn't want to talk anymore. He didn't see hope in Sarutobi Hiruzen, but fortunately he was finally going to abdicate and let the wise man go. The fourth Hokage, Shikato's self-recommendation was just talk. He had no qualifications to compete for the fourth Hokage. He was too young, not even 20 years old, too young. He was far from qualified. If he really wanted to compete, he would compete for the fifth Hokage. After the atmosphere in the conference room returned to the theme, the low and depressing atmosphere gradually dissipated and began to get lively. The senior ninjas each recommended the most ideal candidate for the fourth Hokage in their minds. Shikato took the opportunity to vote for Danzo and explained, "I think the choice of the fourth Hokage must be Danzo-sama." So, the lively conference room was silent again. Everyone turned their eyes to him again. Before that, everyone enthusiastically recommended the fourth Hokage, and the candidates included Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Naimake's Minato. There was even a senior ninja who was moved by what he said just now and supported the third Hokage to continue sitting. But so far, no one has recommended Danzo. Shikato is unique among Scorpion Bomba. The key is that he is a member of the Root Department and sits next to Naimake's Minato. Many people found this very strange. Lu Ren stood up again and explained for his long-term meal ticket. Danzo-sama dedicated his entire life to Konoha. He worked underground without sleep and forgot to eat. He was worried about Konoha day and night, and was always trying to solve problems for Konoha. Danzo opened his mouth. "I turned out to be so great." Lu Ren continued, "Who collected the most intelligence in all the wars? It was Danzo-sama. Who was the one who fought for Konoha and assassinated key figures in various countries? It was Danzo-sama. Who cultivated Konoha's new buds and secretly protected Konoha without making a fuss? It was also Danzo-sama. Danzo-sama is the best candidate for the will of fire." Who would object to this? Who dared to say that he objected? Danzo was sitting there. If he objected in front of the master, he would probably be remembered and couldn't sleep at night. Danzo was also very satisfied with Shikato's way of canvassing votes. Although this kid was often out of tune, he could always hold up the front at the critical moment. As for the previous incident with Hokage Tsukumo, he didn't care at all. Danzo was not a person who cared about reputation. Reputation was nothing. He could release it without changing his expression and then put it back. Danzo only had interests in his eyes, the interests of the village and himself. As long as it was maintained, we could still play together. When the meeting room became quiet, a big hand suddenly stretched out. "I object." Uchiha Fugaku stood up. "I don't care about other people, but I don't care about Danzo." "Uchiha?" Danzo's face darkened. It would be a miracle if Danzo could be in a good mood when he was opposed by the largest clan in Konoha in public. However, the Uchiha clan was not afraid of him. Anyway, the two sides had been at odds for a long time. Shikato also looked at Fugaku. "Evil Eye Uchiha Fugaku." Uchiha Fugaku immediately glared at him. "This nickname of social death, you kid deliberately shouted it out in public. Hyuga Hayashi sat in his seat and said calmly, I have the same idea. Danzo has been active underground for a long time. I am worried that he can't adapt to the sun. Danzo turned his head to look at Hyuga Hayashi. He never expected that this thick-browed and big-eyed Hyuga could say such a thing. He understood the Uchiha clan. After all, it was not the first time that the conflict between the two sides was irreconcilable. But what do you mean by the Hyuga clan? This backstab made him very unhappy. Yuta Tenkaharu and Mitokado were sitting next to Danzo. When they heard their little friend being ridiculed like this, they subconsciously did not stand up to fight back for him, but wanted to laugh for no reason. Danzo lived too darkly in the root, and Hyuga Hayashi's description was so vivid. Danzo looked at the two little friends with a dark face. Yuta Tenkaharu and Mitokado immediately held back their laughter and became serious. Shikato stood up at the right time to act as the atmosphere group. Danzo, he insulted Danzo. Shut up. Shikato sat back down. Namake's Minato came closer and chuckled. You're frustrated, Shikato. Shikato laughed. How could that be? Don't you think this kind of Danzo is more interesting? Interesting? You're the only one who can describe Danzo like this. You're really worthy of being called that. Minato put away his smile. Danzo's dark side was well known. And he had no bottom line when it came to his actions. But it cannot be denied that his starting point was almost all for Konoha. If you look at it from another angle, Danzo is indeed a good person. As long as you are not targeted by him and are not from the Uchiha clan, it's fine. As for Shikato voting for Danzo, Minato was not surprised at all. How could someone from the root department vote for someone else? Shikato sat in his seat, but he felt a ray of eyes staring at him. He turned his head and looked over, and happened to see a pair of big dark eyes looking at him. Short hair, big eyes, and a round nose. And the most eye-catching family emblem of the Uchiha clan on his clothes. This is a 12-year-old boy. After Shikato looked over, the other party immediately lowered his head. The elder brother Nara Shikato noticed his gaze and took the initiative to introduce, that is the newly rising genius of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Shisu. Don't underestimate him. It is said that he helped a lot in the battlefield against the Land of Water. Namake's Minato also smiled. Instant body Shisu, I have seen him twice on the battlefield. Although he is still young, his attainments in the instant body technique are already amazing, and it is said that his blood talent is also very high. Of course, what impressed me most is his mature personality at such a young age. Starting tomorrow, the update time will return to 1 chapter in the early morning and 1 chapter at noon, trying to increase the exposure rate as much as possible. Although it's better than nothing, the current performance is a bit bad. And today seems to be the first round of water push. I hope everyone will try to catch up during this period. Just turn to the last page of the book. Thank you. Chapter 41-5. The recommendation of the 4th Hokage was in full swing. In the meeting room, after Shikato introduced Danzo, the rest of the root began to express their opinions one after another. The Uchiha clan and the Hyuga clan were the largest clans in the village, and they also had the largest number of Jonin. The 8th Hokage stood up and spoke first. In terms of contribution, my Uchiha clan was always one of the best in all the ninja world wars. In terms of elite forces, my Uchiha clan is also a Konoha clan. As the Konoha police force, my clan has also quietly contributed to the village for decades. It is hard to imagine that there has never been a figure of my Uchiha clan in the past Hokage. Everyone present looked over immediately, and the meaning of the 8th Hokage was already very clear. The 8th Hokage finally said, I recommend the head of my clan, Uchiha Fugaku. Whether it is strength, qualifications, or love for Konoha, he has already taken the responsibility. Uchiha Fugaku raised his eyebrows, but did not refute. Although he had no intention of competing for the position of the 4th Hokage, the hawkish faction in the clan obviously felt that this would be a rare opportunity. The clan was about to take off. After the 8th Hokage took the lead, the other Jonin in the Uchiha clan immediately agreed, and even the doves thought that they could compete. Anyway, there was nothing to lose. However, the Uchiha clan started to compete for the position of Hokage, which made Yuta Tenkaharu, who was already suppressing her anger, lose her temper and immediately said, the Uchiha clan is an evil clan. How can we let you sit on the position of Hokage? The gunpowder smell of these words was so strong that the Uchiha clan instantly exploded. They immediately confronted Yuta Tenkaharu. Danzo agreed with his friend's point of view. The Uchiha clan was a clan born to be evil. This was taught to them by the 2nd Hokage Senju Tobirama, and they had seen it with their own eyes over the years. Others were fine, but the Uchiha clan would never do that. But this cannot be said to his face. Kaoru was a little irrational. Shikato bumped Minato Namikaze with his shoulder. Minato turned around. "What's wrong, Shikato? Shikato, it's time for you to show off." Minato sighed, but he quickly stood up. "Advisor, I don't think anyone is born evil, and the Uchiha clan is no exception." Danzo glanced at him. "Namikaze Minato, you are still young. There are many things you don't understand, so don't speak for others rashly." Namikaze Minato wanted to say something. Shikato, as Danzo's professional supporting actor, stood up immediately. "Danzo is right." Danzo stared at him with a dark face. Namikaze Minato looked at Shikato standing next to him strangely. Shikato ignored him. Shikaku winked at Minato. Minato sat down again. Shikaku whispered, "One sentence is enough. It's not good to say too much. Saying too much will make the Uchiha suspect your true intentions on the one hand, and it will offend the elders and advisors on the other." Minato's words were very useful to the Uchiha clan. When they were isolated by the whole village, a candidate for Hokage showed goodwill to them, which immediately made the clan feel more favorable towards Minato Namikaze. Sarutobi Hiruzen knocked on the table at the right time to interrupt the atmosphere of endless arguments. "The Uchiha clan is qualified to compete for the position of Hokage." Sarutobi Hiruzen said this very calmly, which aroused the dissatisfaction of his friends. But Sarutobi Hiruzen still said, "I summarized the main candidates recommended by everyone. After excluding a very small number of people, there are only 5 main candidates left. They are Shimura Danzo, Minato Namikaze, Jiraiya, Orochimaru and Uchiha Fugaku. Among these people, Orochimaru has the highest support rate. Don't look at Orochimaru's gloomy appearance and his frequent disappearance in the laboratory. But Orochimaru has experienced 2 ninja world wars, and his reputation on the battlefield is very high, and he has a lot of crazy fans. In the past, people who have come into contact with Orochimaru often end up with 2 types. One kind of people particularly hate him, and the other kind of people admire him very much. It is rare to see the third kind of people. Especially during this period, there were not many people who hated Orochimaru. His performance before he betrayed Konoha was relatively normal. In some ways, his personality charm was very dazzling. The second was Uchiha Fugaku. All the Jonin of the Uchiha clan voted for their clan leader. And then it was Minato who was supported by the 3 families of Ino, Shika and Joe. Then it was Jiraiya. Jiraiya's desire for competition was too low, and he basically had no such idea. Finally, it was Danzo. Danzo had a dark face. He didn't expect to have the lowest number of votes. It was obviously relying on his root department to defeat the Hidden Cloud Village in the end, but in the end, it was still the subordinates of the root department who chose him. There was no way. He never cared about the reputation, and this time he suffered this loss. Moreover, after Shikato defeated the Hidden Cloud Village, Mitai's subsequent performance was also explosive. The key was that he was sacrificed. The death is often more shocking, which suppresses the influence of the root. Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't expect that Orochimaru would get the highest number of votes. His original intention was that Jiraiya would be more suitable, but unfortunately Jiraiya was a bit disappointing. He coughed and said, "The 5 candidates for the first round have been preliminarily selected. The next step is the second round of screening. 3 days later, the second round of the Jonin meeting will begin here. I hope all the Jonin will be present at that time. At that time, the 2 candidates with the highest votes will be selected from the 5 candidates. I will present the final result to the daimyo, and the daimyo will personally determine the final candidate for the 4th generation." After the Jonin meeting, the Uchiha clan left happily. The clan leader Uchiha Fugaku received the second highest number of votes, which also meant that as long as they worked a little harder and surpassed Orochimaru, they would have a high probability of winning the position of the 4th generation Hokage. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was in front of them, and even Uchiha Fugaku, who had no idea at first, was a little excited at this moment. This was the closest time for the Uchiha clan to be Hokage. Kakashi came over and thanked Shikato. "Thank you, senior." He bowed deeply. Minato, Kushina, Shikaku and others saw this scene and smiled with some relief. The matter of Hatake Sakumo finally had a relatively good result. Shikato shook his head. "Nothing, I didn't say it for you." Kakashi still stubbornly lowered his head to express his gratitude. Seeing this, Shikato said nothing more and said hello to his brother. "I'm leaving first, see you in 3 days." Minato and others also waved goodbye to him. Shikato turned around and was about to leave, but suddenly thought of something and turned back to Minato Namikaze and said, Minato Namikaze, I have confidence in you as the Hokage. If it's you, Konoha should still be worth watching. Minato Namikaze was stunned, then smiled restrainedly. Thank you. Shikato looked at him, but you have to be tougher. Being too gentle is not a good thing. Kindness does not command the army, righteousness does not command wealth, affection does not establish affairs, and kindness does not serve as an official. After giving a warning, Shikato turned around and disappeared on the spot. Namikaze Minato looked at the place where Shikato disappeared and pondered for a while. Kushina glanced at him and puffed up her cheeks. I'm jealous. Namikaze Minato was helpless. Don't make trouble, Kushina. Kushina chuckled, glanced at the direction where Shikato left, turned her head and said to Shikaku, your brother is very capable, and he is not like your lazy temper at all. Shikaku smiled and said nothing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Angry Sarutobi. On the way back, Dear Man keenly noticed that someone was quietly following him. Those in the village should not be enemies. He directly chose to turn into a remote jungle, came to a slightly open area, and stopped. Come out, I'm not used to playing house with others. Dear Man looked around, stood there and waited quietly. The leaves in the forest sparsely shook. Swish, swish, swish. 4 black shadows shuttled through the forest and landed on the 4 corners around Dear Man. Seeing that there were only 4 people, Dear Man was slightly stunned. There should be another one. He glanced over there, and seeing that there seemed to be no movement there, he withdrew his gaze. The 4 people were all wearing Konoha's ninja uniforms and Konoha sword protectors. Some of them carried a small sword on their backs, and some held black brass knuckles. Dear Man glanced at the 4 people. What can I do for you? One of them spoke. His tone was low and threatening. Nara Dearman, even if you have Tuanzo behind you, there are some things you can't say, and some people you can't insult. This time, just take it as a lesson for you to learn your lesson. Dearman was stunned and complained, forgive me, you are really a child playing house. You have to find me for such a trivial matter. The oldest Jonin on the opposite side, who was more than 30 years old, heard Dearman muttering in a low voice, Humph, you want us to forgive you? It's not that easy. Dearman's face darkened. You are so filial. Do your parents know? 1 Shunin, 2 special Jonin, and 1 Jonin. And it looks a bit like they were born on the battlefield. Who are you looking down on? Among the 4, the youngest is only 15 or 16 years old, younger than Dearman, and he is not willing to be outdone. A dog can't spit out every. How come a scum like you didn't die on the battlefield? It's a pity. The 4 people confronted him tit for tat. Dearman was too lazy to talk nonsense with them. They were a bunch of idiots who were fooled by the will of fire and their brains were out of control. Or maybe they were just a bunch of idiots who felt good about themselves. It didn't matter which one it was. His figure disappeared directly into the shadows, which stunned the other 4 people. The Nara clan also had this secret technique. While they were stunned, one of them was kicked away by the Dearman who appeared again. When the other 3 reacted, the Dearman had already disappeared into the shadows again. After 4 times like this, the place became quiet again. He taught these people a lesson easily. These people were so weak that they were ridiculous. Are they really the elite of Konoha? Dearman grabbed the leading ninja and said, I seem to have seen you in the conference room. You seem to be next to that pig called Sarutobi at that time. You are not from the Sarutobi clan, are you, Pa? Sarutobi Goto spat at him indignantly. Dearman tilted his head to avoid it, and then smiled. He raised his hand and pinched his face, and began to exert force with his 5 fingers little by little. I hate trouble, so what I like most is to deal with those who cause trouble for me. Crunch! The facial bones gradually began to deform, and Sarutobi Goto wailed in pain, and blood began to spurt out of his mouth and nose. He brought people here because he really couldn't stand the arrogance of the Dear Man in the conference room. Especially the Lord Sarutobi Hirozen, who was forced by him to bow his head and admit his mistakes. His original intention was to bring people to teach him a lesson, but he didn't want to make things too big. He wanted to be gentle and just beat him half-crippled. At that time, at most he would pay some medical expenses, apologize symbolically, and then let the tribe members come forward to suppress public opinion. But he didn't expect the Nara man to be so powerful, and from the look of him, he actually wanted to kill him. He panicked, and at the same time, he kept cursing this monster in his heart as a pervert. Sarutobi Goto howled in pain, and the other three were also trembling with fear. Wouldn't he be killed to silence them? Dearman tortured Sarutobi Goto for a while, then finally frowned and let go, letting Sarutobi Goto fall to the ground, holding his cheek and wailing. I didn't expect that this couldn't lure out the fifth stalker. Aren't they in the same group? Dearman was thinking, when he suddenly felt a breath rushing towards here quickly. No concealment. Swish. Sarutobi Shinizuke jumped out nimbly, and saw at a glance that the four tribesmen on the ground were curled up with their stomachs in their hands. Especially Big Brother Goto, his face and nose were covered in blood, and even his facial bones were a little deformed. This made his face change immediately. Nara Dearman. What a good thing you did. Sarutobi Goto, who was wailing on the ground, also quickly got up, grabbed Sarutobi Shinizuke's arm, and stared at Dearman with extreme resentment. Shinizuke, this scumbag is crazy, he just wanted to kill me. Sarutobi Shinizuke looked at Dearman in shock when he heard this. He heard from his clan members that Brother Goto had taken people to chase Nara Shikato, and was worried about any accidents, so he hurriedly followed Brother Goto's trail and rushed here. Although he didn't like Shikato, he wouldn't go so far as to attack a ninja from the same village. However, because of their father, the people in the clan have always been a little spoiled, and they might not be so quiet. He expected that there might be a conflict between the two sides, but he didn't expect Shikato to be so cruel. Sarutobi Goto covered his face and said, "This scumbag is a lunatic. I couldn't stand his arrogant attitude in the conference room, so I wanted to come over to argue with him. I didn't expect that he would attack us before we could say a few words." Caught off guard, all of us were tricked. I had temporarily given in, but he still wouldn't give in. If you hadn't arrived in time, my head would have been crushed by him. He is a lunatic. The other three were stunned for a moment, looked at Brother Goto, and soon nodded in agreement, as if they wanted Sarutobi Shinizuke to give them justice. Sarutobi Shinizuke frowned. Of course, he could also feel the exaggeration in Brother Goto's words, but judging from the situation at the scene and Brother Goto's injuries, Nara Shikato did not take it lightly. If he hadn't arrived in time, the consequences, I can't imagine how bad it would be. In addition, Sarutobi Shinizuke was already very dissatisfied with Nara Shikato, so his tone could not help but take on a questioning tone. Nara Shikato, do you know what it means to attack a ninja from the same village? Shikato opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything for a long time. How could he transition to the trial stage? This Sarutobi Goto is a waste, not very strong, but good at speaking. Sarutobi Shinizuke raised his voice. Nara Shikato. Shikato suddenly laughed. You guys made me laugh. He stretched out his hand. Referee, police, judge, they're all your people. What should I say? I always hate to explain useless things to people. If you have the guts, just arrest me. Sarutobi Shinizuke frowned. Nara Shikato, do you think I'm kidding you? You are still smiling until now. Do you really think I don't dare to do it? The smile on Shikato's face gradually subsided. Sarutobi Shinizuke, Nara Shikato, I'm pregnant now. Shikato's eyes were covered with a layer of haze, and he spoke word by word. You shut up. The terrifying armed-color domineering instantly spread all over his body, and even began to infect the ground under his feet. At that moment, Sarutobi Shinizuke felt his heart bulge suddenly, as if something extremely terrifying was going to devour him. It was like a Tyrannosaurus lurking in the dark, and had already firmly set his eyes on his prey. For some reason, he subconsciously took a step back, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes when he looked at Shikato. It has been recommended in the first round, and it is really important to follow up. Please don't keep it for the time being. Chapter 43 Warning of Anger and Collection. The scene became a little deserted. Why aren't you going back? What are you doing here? At this time, a cold voice completely shattered the terrifying momentum. Shikato restrained his overflowing Armament Haki and turned to look at Danzo, who had appeared not far away. At this time, he had no interest in teasing at all. Now that Danzo was here, there should be no fighting. He said lightly, I'm disgusted by someone. I'll leave first. Is that okay, Danzo-sama? With Danzo's experience, he only took a few simple glances and saw the general situation of the incident. Moreover, right or wrong was not important to Danzo, because Shikato was now a member of the root. Danzo nodded, and Shikato left directly. After he left, Danzo looked at Sarutobi Shinosuke and several other members of the Sarutobi clan who were hesitant to speak. The cold single pupil fell on Sarutobi Shinosuke. Sarutobi Shinosuke was under a lot of pressure. There were only a few people in Konoha who could breathe heavily in front of Danzo. He lowered his head. Danzo-sama. Danzo ignored him and said directly, I will pretend that what happened today never happened. I don't want it to happen again. Sarutobi Shinosuke nodded immediately. I understand, Danzo-sama. Sarutobi Goto said unhappily. Why? It was that lunatic who wanted to kill? Before he finished speaking, he noticed that Danzo's gloomy pupils were staring at him with murderous intent, and he was so scared that he swallowed back the rest of his words. Danzo snorted coldly. Each generation is worse than the previous one. Sarutobi has also fallen. After that, he turned and left. After he left, Sarutobi Goto swallowed hard, and then spat on the ground. You're just a mad dog. Do you really think you're the most powerful in Konoha? Sarutobi Shinosuke raised his hand. Stop talking, brother Goto. But that family, I told you to stop talking. Sarutobi Goto. Sarutobi Shinosuke roared in anger, and then realized that his tone was too harsh. But now he was also very confused, and he really didn't have the mood to explain. He just said sorry perfunctorily, and then turned around and left without saying a word. Sarutobi Goto looked at Shinosuke's back as he left, opened his mouth but said nothing. Finally, he lowered his head with an extremely ugly face, his eyes full of anger that was difficult to hide, and he gritted his teeth and remained silent. Who do you think I'm doing this for? After everyone here left, another figure jumped out of the jungle. Uchiha Shisu, wearing the uniform of the Konoha police force and carrying a small sword, appeared. He looked down at the traces of fighting around him and stood there thinking. At this time, under the shadow of the jungle, the voice of the deer man floated out again. The fifth stalker is you. In the jungle, on the tree trunk covered by the shadow, the deer man sat on it, and his black pupils stared at Uchiha Shisu. Uchiha Shisu was a little surprised. He really didn't expect that the deer man didn't leave, but hid not far away. The deer man half closed his eyelids and locked onto Uchiha Shisu like a hunter. Uchiha Shisu, you'd better give me a normal reason. Uchiha Shisu felt a huge pressure coming suddenly. After facing the deer man, he felt the awe-inspiring malice. This is a very scary opponent. The key is that the opponent is obviously still angry at this moment. However, he was very calm at a young age. I'm just curious. Why did you choose to join the route after saying that kind of thing? Of course, the reason why he followed was because he found someone following the deer man, so he quietly hung behind. Shikato did not answer him, but continued to stare at Uchiha Shisu. Uchiha Shisu raised his hand to indicate, I have no intention of being your enemy. On the contrary, I admire you for daring to say such words in such an occasion. Shikato did not comment on his words, stood up in the shadows, and took a last look at him. Don't follow me anymore. Then the whole person disappeared into the shadows. Uchiha Shisu waited for Shikato to leave for a long time before finally daring to take a breath. What a terrible malice. Senior Shikato is so strong. Obviously his heart is towards the light, but he voluntarily joined the route. Senior Shikato is telling me that you don't have to leave your name to protect Konoha. In obscurity, support the towering tree of Konoha. I, Uchiha Shisu, can definitely do it. I will protect Konoha and Uchiha, for sure. A female hot spring bath somewhere in Konoha. Jiraiya was lying outside the bamboo fence, watching the good show inside through a small gap with his eyes wide open. Jiraiya was so fascinated that he wiped his saliva. His mind was full of ideas and creative inspirations kept coming out. He really had no interest in competing with the fourth Hokage. He was casual by nature and used to being free and unrestrained. Naturally, he didn't want to be tied to a position. What's more, the fourth Hokage's competitors were his teammates Orochimaru and his disciple Minato Namikaze. Jiraiya didn't want to compete even more. So, he decisively used his hobbies and continued to conceive his great creation. Now that he needed inspiration, he came to the scene to observe and collect materials. Hey, Jiraiya, I've been looking for you for a long time. What are you doing, Shock? A sudden voice startled Jiraiya, who was concentrating, and he bumped into a bamboo pole beside him. He turned his head and saw a toad squatting behind him. He made a shushing gesture. Kausuke, keep your voice down. It will be bad if someone finds out. Toad Kausuke scratched his head. It was just a group of bald two-legged frogs. What was there to see? Before Jiraiya could say a few words, He felt murderous intent behind him. When he turned around, he saw a group of women lying on the fence, holding wooden bathtubs and glaring at him. One of them scared Jiraiya. He couldn't see clearly because of the mist before, but his face turned pale when he saw it clearly. Sarutobi Biwako's face was full of anger. Jiraiya's old face turned red and he quickly ran away. The wooden basins behind him fell on him like heavy rain. Awkward, so embarrassing. I ran into the master's wife when I was collecting materials. No wonder I always felt that the outline of a figure was very familiar when I peeked at it before. The only thing to blame is that the hot water in the hot spring was too hot and I couldn't see the face clearly. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous even if he had two guts. Toad Kausuke followed him out in a hop and a skip. Jiraiya stopped and quickly forgot the previous embarrassment. By the way, Kausuke, what is the matter with you rushing to find me? Toad Kausuke is a contact frog. Since he found himself, it must be someone from Myaboku Mountain who contacted him. Toad Kausuke. The master had another dream not long ago. He asked me to inform you that I have time to go to Myaboku Mountain. I have something to say to you. Jiraiya frowned. The master is the great toad sage of Myaboku Mountain. His dreams have the miraculous effect of predicting the future. But this kind of predictive dream may not happen once in a long time. Every time it happens, it must mean that a major event that will affect the ninja world will occur. Of course, if the Great Toad Sage takes the initiative to advance a person's future, it can still be done occasionally, but the effect is relatively limited. Although the Great Toad Sage said that he would go when he has time, Jiraiya did not dare to delay it. Chapter 44, Prophecy of Destruction. In the deepest part of Myaboku Mountain, in a huge temple, Jiraiya came to this temple under the guidance of Fukasaku and Shima. The Great Toad Sage was sitting on a huge green chair and dozing off. His skin was already loose, and a pendant with oil characters hung around his neck. When Fukasaku and Shima arrived with Jiraiya, the Great Toad Sage was sleeping while blowing bubbles. Fukasaku jumped onto the stage and shouted, "Master, little Jiraiya is here, pop!" The bubbles burst, and the Great Toad Sage was awakened, and his sleepy eyes slightly opened. Jiraiya was no longer the lively boy he used to be. In this situation, his tone was very respectful. "Great Toad Sage, I wonder if you called me here." What happened again? The Great Toad Sage glanced at the audience and was silent for a long time. "Who are you?" Jiraiya was a little speechless. "You are already so old, why do you always like to play this game?" Shima Sage complained on the side. "Are you confused again?" "He is little Jiraiya, little Jiraiya, little Jiraiya, I remember." The Big Toad Sage opened his eyes a little wider. I called you this time because I had a very long dream. There were some bits and pieces about Konoha in the dream." Jiraiya immediately said. "What happened to Konoha?" The Big Toad Sage opened his big eyes a little wider, showing a little bit of horizontal pupils. "Konoha destroyed, what?" Jiraiya stood up straight suddenly, with an unbelievable look on his face. The Third Ninja World War had just ended. Although Konoha was severely damaged, the final result was still relatively ideal. How could a powerful village with top strength and power such as himself, Orochimaru, Minato, Kushina, Uchiha clan, and Hyuga clan be destroyed? Shenzuo Sage and Shima Sage were also a little bit unbelievable. They had a very good relationship with Konoha, and several consecutive contractors were Konoha ninjas. Even the child of prophecy mentioned by the master before was Jiraiya's disciple. How could such a village be destroyed? Sage Shima, "Master, you are not confused in your sleep. How could Konoha be destroyed?" Sage Fukasaku immediately said. "Old woman, don't talk nonsense. The master would not make such a joke." Jiraiya still couldn't believe it. "Big Toad Sage, is Konoha really destroyed?" However, at this tense moment, the Big Toad Sage suddenly fell asleep with his big head drooping. Sage Fukasaku hurriedly woke it up. "Big Toad Sage, I'm old, I'm sorry for sleeping for a while." Jiraiya was not in the mood to listen to his jokes, but stared at the Big Toad Sage nervously. The Great Toad Sage, "Little Jiraiya, that's right. From the fragment I saw, Konoha was indeed destroyed many years later. There were fireworks everywhere, the Hokage died in battle, and the ninjas in the village suffered heavy casualties. Someone jumped into the sky and destroyed all the Hokage rocks." Jiraiya opened his mouth wide, frowned, and his face was more solemn than ever. The Great Toad Sage sat upright on a tall chair and continued in a light voice, "The information about the child of prophecy has become increasingly vague. and the future seems to be constantly changing. In the last corner I saw, in the future, the world of ninjas encountered an unprecedented change. A man with dark pupils shattered the entire ninja world. The words of the great toad sage became more and more exaggerated, and Jiraiya's eyes widened when he heard it. What a joke. Shattering the ninja world? This kind of thing is unheard of. How could it be possible? This time, even Fukasaku looked at the great toad sage in confusion. Master, are you sure you are not confused? The great toad sage did not answer, because it fell asleep again after saying that, as if the explosion of the ninja world had nothing to do with it. After a brief shock, Jiraiya returned to the question he was most concerned about. Great Toad Sage, do you have any clues about the destruction of Konoha? It doesn't matter whether the ninja world is broken or not. Since it is the last corner, it should be many years later. He is more concerned about Konoha and wants to know more about the future. The Great Toad Sage was awakened, and then fell into the slow memory of the dream. After waiting for a long time, it spoke again. Konoha was destroyed by two people. One of them has pupils like a venomous snake. When Jiraiya heard this description, his face changed color instantly. In his impression, except for his friend Orochimaru, he has never seen snake pupils on anyone else, and the one who can destroy Konoha must not be an unknown person. Among the famous people in the ninja world, apart from Orochimaru, no one else has ever heard of having such characteristics. But he subconsciously wanted to deny this idea. How could Orochimaru destroy Konoha? Now he is the candidate for the fourth generation with the most votes in Konoha. How could such a person destroy Konoha? Impossible, absolutely impossible. It was a coincidence, it must be just a similarity of certain characteristics. Jiraiya left Maiboku Mountain in a daze. This time the prophetic dream was so outrageous that he couldn't believe it. After Jiraiya left, Fukasaku Sage spoke again. Master, has Konoha really been destroyed? The voice of the Great Toad Sage was a little floating, as if flying in the sky. Destruction may not be a bad thing. Rebirth after destruction is the most brilliant. Shima Sage muttered to the side. Isn't it a bad thing that Konoha is destroyed? You are old and confused again. We have to find a way to help little Jiraiya. Jiraiya signed a contract with Maiboku Mountain since he was a child. He can almost be said to have grown up under the care of Fukasaku and Shima Sage. The two sides have a deep affection. The Big Toad Sage did not deny anything, but the light voice came again. The war will follow little Jiraiya to ignite Maiboku Mountain. Maiboku Mountain exists as a fairy mountain outside the world. The biggest reason why it can continue to this day in all the ninja world wars, and even in the period of the Six Paths Sage, is that it has always maintained a neutral relationship. They will contract with humans, but the selection of contracted people is extremely strict, and they rarely take the initiative to participate in the war unless they are spiritual. They have almost never taken the initiative to intervene in the war in the ninja world. If the contracted toads die outside, they just die outside and have never been retaliated. Therefore, Maiboku Mountain can be one of the three holy places. When the sages Fukasaku and Shima heard what the old master said, they were immediately in disbelief. How could it be? With the old master in charge of Maiboku Mountain, how could anything go wrong? The Big Toad Sage gradually opened his eyes. I will die in that war. It didn't seem to care about death at all, and its tone was calm and without any waves. The sages Fukasaku and Shima looked at each other, and were both shocked and speechless. The old master will die? This was something they had never even thought about in the past. Although the old master had been looking very old for a long time, as if he would fall to the ground if the wind blew, the two of them knew very well that the old master was just maintaining such an appearance. The old master was so powerful that even the legendary sage of the Six Paths had to be polite to him. How could such a being die? What a scary trouble little Jiraiya had gotten himself into. How could this happen? Chapter 45 Snake Eyes. After returning to Konoha, Jiraiya was still a little uneasy. Especially when he passed by Orochimaru's house a few times, he wanted to go in and talk to Orochimaru many times. Sarutobi Hiruzen also wanted to talk to Jiraiya. In fact, his original intention was to pay attention to Tsunade. With Tsunade's reputation, popularity, personality and even back, she was the most suitable person to be the fourth generation. It's just that Tsunade experienced many changes in succession, and finally left the village before the end of the war. In addition to Tsunade, he was more optimistic about Jiraiya. In his opinion, the most suitable candidate for the fourth generation was Jiraiya. As for Minato, he was strong enough and had a good personality. But he was too young, and it was easy to be criticized when he was in his early 20s. Orochimaru made him more and more confused over the years, and it seemed that he had become what he is now without realizing it. Uchiha Fugaku, this was not in his consideration at all. He agreed to let the Uchiha clan participate because he did not want to cause too much conflict between the Uchiha clan and the village. He had many ways to suppress the Uchiha clan again, so he did not care about this. Danzo, this was not a good idea either. If Danzo took the position, with his personality, the clans in the village would sooner or later fall apart. So the person who would satisfy him the most was still Jiraiya. But Jiraiya's lazy temper had to be changed. Sarutobi Hiruzen privately arranged for someone to call back the somewhat distraught Jiraiya. Jiraiya sorted out his messy thoughts, and after entering the house, he was about to say hello to the teacher, but he turned around and immediately noticed the teacher's wife Sarutobi Biwako, who was drinking tea with a dark face. For some reason, Jiraiya's mind suddenly popped up some images that were not suitable for the current situation. This made him smile very awkwardly. Sarutobi Biwako snorted with a dark face. Sarutobi Hiruzen asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Biwako turned his head and said, "Ask Jiraiya what he did." Sarutobi Hiruzen was a little confused. Biwako was gentle and rarely got angry. He looked at Jiraiya in confusion. Jiraiya pretended to cough. "Teacher, you know, I need to constantly collect materials to maintain my creative inspiration." Sarutobi Hiruzen immediately interrupted with a blushing face. What do I know? I'm already old, and I've never seen those messy things of yours." "Biwako, you want to wait?" "Jiraiya, what do you mean by that?" He suddenly came to his senses halfway through his words. "How can your collection of materials be related to your master's wife's anger?" Jiraiya awkwardly avoided Sarutobi teacher's scrutiny. Sarutobi Hiruzen blushed on the spot, but he was embarrassed before, but now he was angry. "Jiraiya," his voice suddenly became much higher. "Bastard, you collected materials from Biwako." Before Sarutobi teacher got angry, Jiraiya had to change the subject. "Sarutobi teacher, I just came back from Myaboku Mountain, and the big toad sage told me a very bad prophecy." Sarutobi Hiruzen was temporarily attracted by this sentence. He put down his pipe. "What?" Jiraiya took a breath. "The big toad sage told me that Konoha will be destroyed in the near future." Sarutobi Hiruzen's face suddenly became solemn, and he temporarily put the matter of Lake Biwa behind him, and looked at Jiraiya seriously. When Jiraiya said this, his face was also a little obscure. After hesitating for a while, he still said, "It told me that many years later, Konoha was engulfed in war, and the Hokage died in the war. And Konoha was destroyed by two people, one of whom had eyes like a venomous snake." Bang! Sarutobi Hiruzen stood up suddenly, and the chair under him fell to the ground. Jiraiya immediately comforted him. "Teacher, don't be nervous. I think the Great Toad Sage is definitely not talking about Orochimaru. How could Orochimaru attack Konoha? He is now the candidate with the highest number of votes for the fourth Hokage. I believe in Orochimaru." Sarutobi Hiruzen lifted up his chair, sat down again, and took a puff of cigarette. "No, if it's him, maybe it's true." Jiraiya couldn't agree with Sarutobi Hiruzen's words. "What do you mean it's true if it's him? How could Orochimaru attack Konoha? Impossible." "Why did Sarutobi teacher question Orochimaru?" Jiraiya laughed and said, "How could that be, Sarutobi teacher? Orochimaru is definitely not that kind of person. Don't I know him? He is a guy who is cold on the outside but warm on the inside." Sarutobi Hiruzen tapped his pipe and said, "Jiraiya, how long have you not talked to Orochimaru?" Jiraiya fell into silence. "Since the Third World War." No, it should be said that since the Second World War, Orochimaru has rarely participated in the dinners between the teams. Even if they occasionally met, Orochimaru rarely paid attention to him. During the Third World War, everyone was even busier. And Orochimaru has always been a reclusive person. It has been a long time since they had a good chat. At the same time, as they grow older, it is no longer the time to speak freely like when they were children. But even so, Jiraiya does not believe that Orochimaru will be the one to destroy Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. "I arranged for Orochimaru to follow Danzo. Maybe it was a wrong decision. Over the years, the two of them have done a lot of things that cross the line behind my back." Jiraiya wanted to say something, but couldn't, because he had heard of it, but had never seen it, so he never believed it. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. "The prophecy of that immortal has never been wrong, right?" Jiraiya nodded with difficulty and bitterness. Sarutobi Hiruzen. In that case, no matter whether the person who destroys Konoha in the future is Orochimaru or not, the position of the fourth Hokage cannot be given to him. Jiraiya, you have to fight for it seriously. Jiraiya immediately shook his head. No, I can't do it. Teacher Sarutobi, you know me, I'm used to being free and undisciplined. I can't stay in the same place. I'm not that kind of material at all. Don't underestimate yourself. It's really not possible. I really can't do it. Let me be the Hokage. It's better to kill me. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Jiraiya, who refused to bow his head and looked embarrassed, and he was immediately very annoyed. Jiraiya said, Teacher, in fact, compared to me, Minato is more suitable for the position of Hokage. Minato, Sarutobi Hiruzen thoughtfully, his age is easily looked down upon by the daimyo. He is too young. And Minato is closer to the Ino Shikato generation, who is also a generation apart from himself, and their relationship was not as good as imagined. The most important thing is that Minato's philosophy is somewhat conflicting with his. Although they both start from the goal of Konoha, their specific policies are somewhat different. He is not worried about Minato's lack of strength, but his lack of experience. He is worried that Minato will not be able to grasp many aspects. Jiraiya said seriously, Teacher Sarutobi, please believe in Minato. He is a more suitable person to sit on the position of Hokage than me. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a puff of cigarette, was silent for a while, and then nodded, I understand. Chapter 46 Black and White. Under Konoha, somewhere in an abandoned underground base. Mabu went to light the oil lamps in the corridor as usual. After returning to a brighter secret room, he saw Samu, who was still working hard, and immediately complained, Samu, can't you help me share a little bit of the burden for the sake of sympathy? I have to arrange dinner later. Samu shook his golden ear-length hair coldly. In that guy's words, you are trained as his personal secretary, and I am trained as a guardian ninja. Cooking, washing and folding quilts are your duties. My task is just to protect him. Mabu found a place to sit down and combed his hair. He has a nice idea. Samu, you didn't refuse. Humph, you didn't refuse either. I am the fish on the chopping board. No one can refuse, so no one should laugh at each other. Mabu lay on the stone table. Samu, why don't you take a break and chat? Not interested. Are you a girl? Why are you so cold? Samu didn't say anything, just rubbed his shoulders. Mabu advised, you must be tired. Come and take a break. Samu shook his head. My shoulders are a little sore. Maybe the burden I have been carrying is getting heavier recently. When will you put on the back? Mabu came to his senses halfway through his words, and immediately said sourly, what's the use? No one will see it anyway. Samu finally put down the knife, walked over and sat aside, and poured himself a glass of water. Mabu said again, hey, being captured in such a hellish place, I really don't know what to do in the future. I remember that when that guy took off his mask, your eyes were wide open. No way. Stupid Samu. I'm not a fangirl, okay, really? I reserve my opinion on this. Damn it, you're obviously not much better than me. Why are you so proud? I'm not as bad as you. Do you want me to describe your expression at that time? The two talked and made a fuss for a while, and Mabu lay on the table again. Hey, I seem to have a premonition of our miserable future. Samu rubbed his shoulders. This result now is already our luck. Mabu was silent after hearing this. Indeed, if the luck was a little worse, and he met someone like Danzo or other ninjas, the result would probably be either death or a life worse than death. As it is now, except for the restriction of freedom, there is no unbearable experience, which can be regarded as unexpected happiness. Mabu suddenly looked around, then leaned over and whispered, Samu, should we try to escape again? Samu was about to remind her not to talk nonsense, but when she looked up, she saw a black shadow crawling out from under Mabu's feet, and then condensed into shape little by little. The shadow clone in the form of 5 or 6 years old jumped out from behind her. Mabu was still confused. Speak. Samu's cold face meant to ignore me. I am a ninja. The shadow clone also stood behind Mabu at the right time and said in a light tone, Mabu, you are quite courageous. Mabu was startled and turned her head as if struck by lightning. You are here. You only remember to eat but not to be beaten. You still come here after so many times. Tell me, do you do it yourself or let me help you? Can I not come? The shadow clone began to move his wrist, and it seemed that he wanted me to do it. Mabu seemed to be disappointed and frustrated. I'll do it, don't touch me. Then Mabuai was taken away by the clone mercilessly. Samu was not surprised. It was not the first time that Mabuai was punished. There was no need to worry about her. Because the strange childlike clone punished people by fixing them on the cross and then tickling their soles or armpits with a tickler. It didn't hurt, but it could make people laugh and cry. After crying once, Samu swore that he would never let him catch her again. As a cold female ninja, it was really embarrassing. And in this regard, Samu admired Mabuai. This was not the first time that Mabuai was caught. It was not even 2 or 3 times, but so many times that Samu was too lazy to count. If she was not punished once a day, she felt uncomfortable all over. Sometimes, she even suspected that Mabuai did it on purpose. Otherwise, it didn't make sense for her to make some small moves every now and then. She knew she couldn't escape, but she kept making small moves. People had to doubt her. After a while, Mabuai, who looked like a ragdoll, was thrown in. The shadow clone glanced at Mabuai lying on the ground and frowned. I have recently started to feel that you are teasing me in different ways. If there is a next time, I will change the way to make you suffer. Mabuai on the ground shouted weakly. No, don't change. The shadow clone's face was full of black lines. It was the first time that he was teased by someone, so he left here without saying anything. Samai came over and helped Mabuai sit up. Then she looked at him with a new look. I really underestimated you before. You are the one who is more perverted. Mabuai smiled weakly. Hey, don't you think that little guy is cute? Samu, I'm not as perverted as you. Anyway, it's just a clone, Mabuai said weakly, because it's a clone. If the real body was here, I wouldn't dare to act rashly. But the clone is really interesting and cute. Hey, Mabuai fell into the fantasy of some strange things, and the smile on her face gradually became obsessed. Samu glanced at her and shook his head, rubbing her shoulders and muttering to herself, really, my shoulders have been getting more and more sore recently. Samu bit her lip. Could it be? No, starting from tomorrow night, I must change myself and restrain myself. Samu, you can do it, you have to be a cold and powerful female ninja. Samu encouraged herself with determination, but soon began to rub her shoulders again. A trace of worry appeared on the cold face. It was so annoying. Why do I have to bear a burden that I shouldn't have at this age? The shadow clone hiding in the shadows saw all the expressions of the two people. He always felt that it might not be the right decision to capture them and bring them back. Before dark, the deer man came back on time. Mabuai had already prepared a table of food. But his cooking skills were still as hard to describe as before. In front of the deer man's real body, Mabuai was honest like a child who had made a mistake, and tiptoed. The three of them sat at the same table, and the deer man kept silent while eating and sleeping. Mabuai glanced at Samu weakly and whispered, the pressure is so great. Samu ate intently and ignored her. The deer man just finished eating by himself, and then said, Mabuai, here. Mabuai shuddered and stood up subconsciously. For some reason, when facing the tiny clone, she couldn't help wanting to tease him, but when facing the real body, she was very nervous. Lu Ren was a little speechless about this girl's reaction. You didn't do this when you teased my clone. He pointed to a pile of books at the door. Within 3 days, I hope you can recite them backwards. Mabuai looked over with a look of surprise. On the cover of the top book was written Cooking Safety Manual. Chapter 47 Uchiha's mood is like a roller coaster. This is, well, try to improve your cooking skills. I can't say that the food you cook is delicious, but it's hard to swallow. Every time I eat, it's like going to the execution ground. Is this so bad? Do you think it tastes good? Well, it doesn't. Is there a problem? No. After the deer man stood up, he said to Samu, come with me. There is still some time before dark. Don't waste it. Samu nodded and followed. She knew it was time for her practical training again. On the way, Samu rubbed her shoulders out of habit. The deer man glanced at her and stopped. Samu looked up. Deerman, you are still young? I think it would be better for you to restrain yourself. Samu blushed for a rare moment. You? How do you know? Do you think my ears are just for show? Sometimes, you are a little noisy at night. How could that be? Mabu is like a dead pig when she falls asleep. Well, even pigs may not be able to bear this kind of insult. I see. Samu blushed and lowered her head. What a social failure, being discovered by this guy. I was supposed to be a cold female ninja. 3 days later the second meeting of the Jonin was held. This time,
Almost all the Jonin of Konoha were present. The Uchiha clan swept away the haze of the past and came in groups. The leader, Uchiha Fugaku, took a step and sat down, slowly opened his eyes, and was full of the momentum of a big boss. It's stable. After 3 days of preparation, the Uchiha clan has been well prepared. In the past few days, they used money to pave the way and basically attracted all the swinging votes. He was confident that he would win the vote this time. The position of the 4th generation, this time my Uchiha clan must win. Another big clan, the Hyuga clan, is a different faction, and the clan is also full of elites. However, they still sit in a corner, maintaining their own aloof style, and are indifferent to everyone, a real male god. Hyuga Hayashi closed his eyes and rested. He has already sat on the Daioyute, and the entire Hyuga clan does not compete for that position, but it is precisely because of not competing that it is the biggest competition. As long as you want to compete for the 4th generation, no one can ignore such a large elite group of the Hyuga clan. And if you want to win them over, you naturally have to pay benefits. The Hyuga clan grabbed both hands, one hand here and the other, and ate a lot of money directly. Especially the Uchiha clan, they are too generous. Danzo is not good, he is stingy. But it could be that he really has no money. It is said that all of Danzo's money was used to hire a construction team to dig a hole. It is said that there are many Danzo's nests under Konoha, but I don't know if it is true or not. Seeing that it was getting late and that almost everyone had arrived, Sarutobi Hirozen stood up and said, "Before the second round of voting begins, I have 2 things to announce." Uchiha Fugaku changed his usual calmness and said with a little impatience, "Hurry up and start. My Uchiha clan has been waiting for too long." Sarutobi Hirozen glanced at him and said it as if you could sit on the position of Hokage. "You are as proud as ever, Uchiha." Danzo had been in contact with Shikato more and learned a few things. At this time, he suddenly said, "Waiting too long? Waiting for what too long? Are you going to go home and sleep later? After all, dreams can have anything." He also learned the word he from Shikato, because every time Shikato said he to him, Danzo wanted to kill him. It feels full of sarcasm, just right for Uchiha. It's just that Danzo didn't grasp the essence of smiling with a fake smile, or maybe he hadn't smiled in front of people for a long time, so when he laughed, his whole old face was squeezed together. In the end, his big yellow teeth were exposed, and at first glance he looked like a blooming chrysanthemum. The meeting room was silent for a moment, and everyone looked at Danzo with strange expressions. Danzo realized that the atmosphere was not right, so he restrained his smile, closed his eyes, and returned to his original aloofness. Hearing the slight sound of friction beside him, he opened his eyes a little and looked at Shikato. "What are you doing?" Shikato wrote and drew on the notebook without raising his head. "I will write down all the people who just held back their laughter in the notebook, and then I will take revenge on Danzo later." Danzo's face became darker. Mitokado N was comforting Danzo on the side. "There is no need to be petty with young people, Danzo," Utatane Kaharu echoed. "Yes, at least everyone held back." Mitokado N. "Kaharu, if you can't talk, don't talk next time." Danzo's face has become darker. Shikato leaned closer and whispered, "Danzo-sama, there is really no need to haggle with the young people, because they were the ones who had the most trouble holding back their laughter just now." Mitokado N and Utatane Kaharu, Shikato continued to add in a low voice, "I almost couldn't hold it back." Sarutobi Hirozen coughed quickly, interrupting the gradually uneasy atmosphere among his friends. "Before voting, I have 2 announcements to make. First, Jiraiya, one of the 5 candidates before, took the initiative to announce his abstention. Then, another candidate, Shimura Danzo, also chose to abstain." Uchiha Fugaku almost laughed out loud when he heard this. There were 2 fewer competitors, and 1 person was eliminated from the 3, and 2 people advanced to the final round. With a nearly 70% chance of advancing, plus the votes I pulled, this time it's still easy. Jiraiya raised his hand at the right time and took the initiative to say, "I know very well that I am not the material for being Hokage, so I hope that those who vote for me can vote for Minato. He is the most suitable candidate for the 4th generation in my mind, and the just concluded Ninja World War has proved his strength. If possible, please vote for him." Namake's Minato looked at Jiraiya teacher in surprise. Jiraiya teacher had not told him about this before, and he was immediately touched. Uchiha Fugaku opened his mouth and suddenly couldn't speak. "Can you still play like this? Is this considered cheating?" Then he looked at Danzo. Did Danzo give up because of this? Danzo sat in his seat with his eyes closed, saying nothing. Uchiha Fugaku was relieved. It seems that my chances are still very high. Shikato was sitting quietly below Danzo at this time. They had already received Danzo's instructions to vote all for Orochimaru. It seemed that both parties had agreed privately that Danzo was going to support Orochimaru to take the position. Soon, the second round of voting began. This time, the voting method was secret ballot. A member of the ANBU, as the registrar, counted the votes of the 3 people one by one. The Uchiha clan was originally full of confidence, and even a little inflated. With Jiraiya's sudden announcement, their hearts sank, and they were all uneasy for a while. Then, as the results of the 3 people's votes rose little by little, the faces of the Uchiha clan became darker and darker. The votes of Orochimaru and Namake's Minato were wrong. The two were obviously much higher than the previous round. Even though the Uchiha clan used money to open the way and pulled a lot of middle votes, the final result of the 3 people was that Uchiha Fugaku successfully came in last. Fugaku's face was black. He spent a lot of money, but in the end he got the word eliminated? You teamed up to play with me, right? I'll look easy to bully, right? Bullying the Uchiha? Right. 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 Fugaku kept roaring in his heart, but his face was only slightly gloomy. He maintained a mature general demeanor, said nothing, but his hands trembled several times. The Uchiha clan behind him all had dark faces. Spending a lot of money, but getting nothing, a huge loss. Chapter 48 Orochimaru and the Jinchuuriki. The result of the second round of voting showed that Uchiha Fugaku was successfully eliminated, which was what everyone expected except the Uchiha clan. The Uchiha clan was originally the top family in Konoha, and no family in the village could compete with the Uchiha clan. Even the Hyuga clan was not so good. If the Uchiha clan really succeeded in taking the position of Hokage in the future would probably become a family inheritance system. Therefore, almost no family or individual hoped that the Uchiha clan would take the position. Moreover, the Konoha high-level officials also followed the will of the second-generation Hokage and always felt that the Uchiha clan was an evil clan. Naturally, it was even more impossible to give them a chance. Even the relatively mild Sarutobi Hiruzen would never agree to the Uchiha clan taking the position. Jiraiya and Danzo's giving up was the Konoha high-level officials' decisive blow to the Uchiha clan. Orochimaru and Namake's Minato received the highest votes. Next, Sarutobi Hiruzen will lead 2 advisors and the elder Shimura Danzo to pay homage to the daimyo of the Land of Fire. The 2 candidates will be recommended to the daimyo, who will make the final choice. However, this choice actually depends on Sarutobi Hiruzen and Danzo, who can convince the daimyo. What the final result will be, whether it is the same as the original work, these dear people don't care. Anyway, it will never be his turn to be the 4th generation. After leaving the meeting room, the dear people were stopped as soon as they walked out of the door. Dear people, we meet again, a gloomy voice came from behind. Orochimaru stood in the dark corner, with a bloodless face and a pair of venomous snake-like vertical pupils staring at the dear people. Dear people, Lord Orochimaru, first of all, I have to congratulate you, the 4th generation is almost within reach. Orochimaru didn't seem to care about the Hokage very much, and didn't answer directly, but said, this should be the 3rd time we have met. I heard Danzo talk about you several times, and he was full of praise for you. It is natural to praise you, because dear people are still the best sword in Danzo's hands. Shikato didn't want to continue talking nonsense with Orochimaru. After all, he and Orochimaru were not familiar with each other. At most, he had no bad feelings towards Orochimaru, but he definitely didn't like him. After all, he used children for human experiments. Orochimaru's bottom line was as low as Danzo's, which was terribly low. Shikato and Danzo could still joke around and have fun with each other. After all, Danzo was still a serious person. But Orochimaru was fine. With his perverted level, it would be a headache if he took any joke seriously. What's the matter, Lord Orochimaru? Kakato-kun doesn't seem to like me. Lord Orochimaru, please speak frankly. I've heard from Danzo that Kakato-kun seems to possess the terrifying power to fight the tailed beasts in close combat. I'm curious, does the Nara clan have this bloodline in their genes? At this point, Orochimaru couldn't help but move closer, sticking out his long tongue with a sealed scroll rolled up on his tongue. Kakato-kun, can you give me a piece of your cell tissue? Kakato avoided a little. Okay, but mine is a secret technique and has nothing to do with bloodline. Believe it or not, He took off the scroll, cut a small hole on his fingertips with a kunai, and dripped a few drops of blood that were sealed in the scroll. Then he looked up and said, "Lord Orochimaru, has anyone told you that you have gone further and further down the path of perversion?" Orochimaru didn't even use his hands to receive it. He rolled the scroll into his stomach little by little with his tongue, and then stared at Shikato with his sharp vertical pupils. "Thank you for the compliment, Shikato-kun. You are the first person to praise me like this." Shikato felt that he couldn't communicate with him. It was too disgusting. "Next time you give me something like this, I won't take it." It was all saliva. I really couldn't stand him. A smile appeared on Orochimaru's pale face. "Really? What a pity. I thought Shikato-kun was the same as me." Shikato ignored him and said goodbye. "Nothing else, I'll leave first," turning around and leaving. This time Orochimaru didn't stop him. But not long after he left, he was stopped again. Shikato was a little speechless. Is today a special day? Looking back, it was his brother Nara Shikato, Yamanaka Inochi, Akemichi Choza, and Namikaze Minato and his wife. Shikato called out to his colleague not far away, "You go back first and explain to Danzo for me. I may have some small things that will take me a while." The rude people took the order and left. Danzo had no intention of obstructing Shikato and Minato Namikaze from contacting each other. After all, the relationship between the Ino, Shika and Joe families and Minato Namikaze was there. It was much better to contact openly than to contact in secret. Moreover, Minato Namikaze was a qualified Konoha ninja, which Shivan Danzo could not deny. Danzo did not think that Shikato would betray him, not to mention that he had the tongue eradication seal on his body. This was also an important reason why Danzo was relieved of Shikato. "What's up, bro? It's Minato who's looking for you." "Oh, Minato-senpai. Oh, by the way, I haven't congratulated you yet. Minato-senpai, you're just one step away from becoming the fourth Hokage. Maybe next time we meet, I'll have to call you Hokage-sama." "No, that feels a bit too distant." Namikaze Minato smiled and waved his hand, then said, "Shikato, I want to trouble you with something. Do you have time?" "Shikato, you should be free before dark. I've asked someone to ask for leave from Danzo for me. Let's talk while we're walking." "Okay." Namikaze Minato asked Shikato for help because Kushina was preparing to practice the perfect Jinchuriki. This process requires constant communication with the tailed beast in the body, and even attempts to subdue it, and to partially unlock the 8 diagrams seal, so there is a great risk of the tailed beast going berserk during this process. If this really happens, someone will need to help suppress Kushina after the runaway to prevent accidents. Minato didn't know Shikato's strength, but Shikaku had confidence in his brother Shikato, so he recommended him to Minato. Minato had already contacted Jiraiya, but he happened to meet Shikato again, so he planned to ask Shikato to help him try. However, this matter was very dangerous, so Minato didn't want to force others to help. He told Shikato the cause and effect, as well as the dangers, and then waited for his answer. Shikato pushed a mask on his forehead. "Nine-tailed? No problem. I am really curious about the nine-tailed, which is known as the strongest tailed beast. However, why do you want to practice the perfect Jinchuriki now? If you don't handle it well, some inevitable things will happen, which will inevitably affect your election for the 4th generation." Namikaze Minato, "No problem, I have the confidence to handle these." Nara Shikato joked on the side, "You want a child? Only by becoming a perfect Jinchuriki can the influence of the tailed beast on the child be minimized. As long as there is a little possibility of good, Minato and his wife are ready to try." Namikaze Minato smiled and did not refute. Kushina glared at Nara Shikato in shame and anger. "What nonsense are you talking about? Do you want me to hit you away?" Nara Shikato immediately shook his head. "I was wrong, don't do that. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49, Embarrassed Jiraiya. With the Flying Thunder God technique of Minato Namikaze, the group quickly moved to the place prepared in advance. It was an uninhabited area located in the southwest of Konoha, at the edge of the area. In the empty and huge valley, there were huge black and gray stones everywhere, and the surrounding vegetation was dry and the streams were dry. The valley was dead silent, and even birds rarely flew over. Nara Shikato, Yamanaka Inoichi and Akimichi Chusa stood at the outermost edge of the valley and worked together to pull up a huge barrier to shield the inside and outside. Minato Namikaze, Uzumaki Kushina, Shikato, and Jiraiya, who arrived last, stayed in the valley to make the final preparations. At this time, Minato Namikaze clearly felt the gunpowder between Jiraiya and Shikato. He said with a little embarrassment, Teacher, is there any misunderstanding between you and Shikato? Jiraiya snorted, no misunderstanding, it's just that I'm not on the same side with him. Jiraiya has now figured out some of the inside stories of the Shikato incident, and he is a little resentful of Sarutobi. But Jiraiya did not regret wrongly accusing Shikato. Because according to some subsequent investigations, he found that when Shikato's team was on a mission, the captain Shikato was acting alone for a long time, completely ignoring his two teammates and showing great indifference. In this situation, it was only a matter of time before an accident happened. From some of Shikato's mission records, Jiraiya became more and more certain of Shikato's indifference. Moreover, there were very obvious differences in the three views of both sides in many aspects. What's more, some factors of Tsunade also made Jiraiya very unhappy with Shikato. When Minato Namikaze heard what Jiraiya said, he was immediately embarrassed. Saying this in front of the main character, it seemed that Jiraiya had a big misunderstanding of Shikato, which gave him even more headaches. Shikato of course also heard Jiraiya's blunt words. He sneered, and did not give Jiraiya any face, retorting, "It just so happens that I don't like you either. You're old enough to play voyeurism every day. I heard that you even saw your own master's wife naked a few days ago. Tisk, I really don't know what kind of fetish you have. Are you tired of ordinary people and start to seek excitement?" Although this matter did not spread, there was more than one person in the hot spring at that time. The Root Department knew all kinds of news in Konoha, and Danzo knew every hair of Sarutobi Hirozen. Naturally, this gossip did not escape the Root's intelligence notes. Shikato was lucky enough to see this gossip. Since Jiraiya was not polite, he certainly didn't need to be polite. As soon as Shikato finished speaking, not to mention Minato, even Kushina widened her eyes and looked at Jiraiya teacher in shock. If I remember correctly, although Biwako-sama was well maintained, he should be over 50. More importantly, of course, is the identity of Master Biwako. This is not good, Master Jiraiya. Shikato continued to fan the flames. When the master's wife gets tired of you, shouldn't you change your apprentice's wife? Nara Shikato, Jiraiya shouted angrily, interrupting the second half of Shikato's sentence, but it was obvious that everyone already knew it. Minato was also a little speechless, being caught in the middle and being torn. Kushina's cheeks were slightly red, and she puffed up her cheeks angrily and glared at Shikato. Shikato didn't pay attention to the others, and confronted the angry Jiraiya tit for tat, full of provocation. So loud, what do you want to teach me? Namikaze Minato had to squeeze in between the two of them, persuading both sides to calm down with a headache. Seeing that Minato Namikaze had given Jiraiya a way out, Jiraiya stared at Shikato and snorted, "There should be a limit to joking, you are so disrespectful." Shikato was so angry at his forced and reasonable face that he laughed. "Are you joking? I always think that it is normal for men to be lustful, but being vulgar is disgusting. Tell me which of the things I just said is false, and there should be a limit to joking." Jiraiya, the three ninjas of Konoha, please tell me clearly. Jiraiya was blocked and couldn't say a word. After all, it was a fact that had already happened. Although it was an accident, there was no way to explain it in public. Shikato added fuel to the fire. "Look at your current style. You regard vulgarity as virtue, laziness as personality, and prejudice as principle. Tell me, what qualifications do you have to be admired by people like you? What are you pretending to be in the village every day? Are you setting up a persona? It's boring." Jiraiya was blushing and couldn't fart for a long time. Kushina was a little stunned. Is this Shikaku's younger brother? So amazing. He actually called Jiraiya a mute. I felt like laughing for no reason. It was the first time that Minato Namikaze saw such a sharp retort. Jiraiya held back the word "you" for a long time, but he couldn't utter the second word. Minato Namikaze quickly grabbed Shikato and begged in a low voice, "Shikato, stop talking. If you continue, Jiraiya will be too embarrassed to see anyone. As a grown man, you must admit your mistakes and stand at attention when you are beaten." Minato Namikaze responded repeatedly. Jiraiya's face turned red, and he shouted, "Yes, I was wrong. But so what, I just won't change."
What do you know, you little brat? I dedicated myself to art, and that was material collection. Do you understand material collection? After saying that, he turned around and looked like if you don't understand, don't talk nonsense. From the angle that Shikato and the others couldn't see, Jiraiya's eyes were red with embarrassment. He wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Being criticized in front of his disciples was so embarrassing that it was hard to describe. Seeing that he was still stubborn, Shikato said, "Material? Your teacher should also thank you for helping your master's wife to successfully gain fans in the ninja world and quickly become a Shikato's mouth was covered by a hand before he finished speaking. Kushina couldn't bear it any longer. After covering Shikato's mouth, she whispered, "Hey, you are too venomous, don't say a few words, or I will beat you up." After saying that, she waved her fist at him. Shikato almost complained about Jiraiya to his heart's content, and the next thing was to get down to business. If he continued to talk, Jiraiya would probably have to dig a hole in the ground to crawl into it, so he nodded. Seeing that Shikato was honest, Kushina let him go and made an okay gesture to Minato. Minato smiled bitterly and looked at Jiraiya and Shikato. He really didn't expect the two to be so tit for tat. Moreover, after the fury, Shikato's killing power is simply terrifying. He is worthy of being the master who made the Sandaime and other Konoha high-level officials speechless in the conference room. Jiraiya-sensei is no match at all. Thinking of this, Minato also inexplicably wanted to laugh. To be honest, Jiraiya-sensei's hobbies sometimes give him a headache, and can even be said to be quite annoying. There is no way, who made him start a family? Before starting the formal training of the perfect Jinchuriki, Kushina especially reminded Jiraiya and Shikato solemnly, "If there is a problem in my training, please don't care about my feelings at that time, and you must wake me up with force." Jiraiya nodded seriously, "Don't worry, you will be fine." Shikato also nodded seriously, "Okay, I will try to restrain myself." Kushina looked at him, "It's not restrained, but you must be prepared to kill me. I don't want my friends to get hurt because of my own reasons." "Shikato, are you so cruel to yourself? It's not good to be too hard, right?" However, Kushina was too serious, and Shikato was too embarrassed to refuse, so he looked at Minato. As Kushina's husband, Minato was naturally aware of the dangers of accidents. A runaway Kushina was very scary, so he nodded without hesitation. Shikato immediately became serious. Since both of them agreed, it would be easy to talk. Chapter 50, The Story of a Hero. In the valley, Kushina sat not far away and had already begun to try to communicate with the nine tails sealed in her body. Namake's Minato stood aside, observing Kushina's condition at any time. Shikato and Jiraiya stood a little further away. Jiraiya seemed a little depressed, and snorted at Shikato, "I hope your strength is as good as your mouth." Shikato glanced at Jiraiya, who was actively looking for trouble. "I will let Tsunade know whether I am good at talking later, so forget it." Jiraiya gritted his teeth, feeling that he was about to be chopped off by jealousy. "Don't be so proud. Tsunade only treats you as a friend at best. Yeah, it's a pity that she treats you as a buddy." Jiraiya. Namake's Minato, who was guarding Kushina in the distance, looked at them helplessly. They started to quarrel again after a while. But soon he was not in the mood to pay attention to other things, because a blood-red malice suddenly spread out from Kushina's body, spreading in an arc, stirring up a layer of dust on the ground. Shikato and Jiraiya turned their heads at the same time, staring at Kushina with her fiery red hair flying. The blood-red chakra was like a wave, rolling over. Shikato felt the fiery breath coming towards him, and his eyebrows raised slightly. "Is this the chakra of the nine tails?" At this moment, some bubble-shaped tailed beast coats have begun to appear on Kushina's body. However, the overall state is still relatively stable, and the tailed beast coat has not expanded. As time goes by, it is slowly weakening. Jiraiya and Minato Namake's also relaxed a little. As time passes by, Kushina's state has become more and more stable, and even the tailed beast coat on her body has completely disappeared. This is a good phenomenon, but this stability was suddenly shattered in a second. The cold and scarlet chakra exploded, setting off a huge storm that made it difficult for people to open their eyes. When this huge chakra converged a little, Kushina, who had already turned into a half-tailed beast, was revealed. The tailed beast coat completely wrapped around its body, and the color of the coat was deepening rapidly until it completely turned into black and red. Cold, depressing, and icy. This is the intuitive feeling of the nine tails chakra.
It was not the first time that Shikato had greeted the tailed beast, but it was the first time that he had felt such obvious malicious chakra. The four black and red tails stirred gently, and a wave of chakra came again. It caused stones in the valley to fly, and the clothes on his body rustled. Looking at the monster crawling on the ground, in which no human form could be seen at all, Shikato licked a corner of his dry mouth. "Hey, is this the Nine Tails? It's a bit scary," Jiraiya immediately snorted. "If you're scared," then before he finished speaking, he saw the expression in Shikato's eyes that was obviously excited, so he couldn't say the second half of the sarcasm. What's wrong with this kid? What the hell is it that he is excited about facing Kushina, who has transformed into a tailed beast? Is his taste so strong? Jiraiya complained in his heart, and then immediately said, "Minato, got it." Minato nodded solemnly. The Flying Thunder God technique was instantly used to avoid the black and red claws of the half-tailed beast, and he retreated directly to the side of Jiraiya and Shikato. The coordinates of the Flying Thunder God technique were already everywhere around the valley. Minato's fighting style tends to be against people, and he has always won by speed. His main means of attack are Rasengan and Flying Thunder God. It's okay when fighting against people, but when fighting against tailed beasts, the means of attack are very scarce. Therefore, the tone of this battle from the beginning is to use Jiraiya as the main attack to suppress Kushina, who has turned into a tailed beast, and then Minato will act according to the situation. For this reason, Shikato and Jiraiya were specially given a special kunai so that he can help at any time. Kushina has been completely wrapped in the tailed beast's coat at this stage and has completely lost her mind. Her whole body was crawling on the ground, and every time the four black and red tails behind her buttocks shook, they could stir up red chakra ripples. This wave of waves spread out in circles with Kushina, who had transformed into a half-tailed beast, as the core. Shikato stared at Kushina, who had transformed into a four-tailed beast, and then the next second the surrounding environment suddenly changed. The deadly valley turned into a dark and gloomy dungeon environment, and scarlet chakra ripples overflowed on the ground around. Shikato, Minato, and Jiraiya stood in it. This was the nine-tailed fox in Kushina's body forcibly pulling a trace of the three people's spirit into the space of the 8 diagrams seal. The darkness was slightly suppressed, and the bright chakra-like fire illuminated the dark dungeon. A huge orange-yellow demon fox as big as a hill lay on the ground, its claws like knives, grabbing the ground, and its eyes were full of violence and cruelty. Baring teeth and full of fierceness. Namake's Minato, a huge roar came roaring. The sound waves hit the ground, causing chakra ripples to spread out in circles. Minato's face was solemn. Nine-tailed fox, as the husband of Uzumaki Kushina, it was not the first time he had seen the nine-tailed fox. He had even helped Kushina strengthen the 8 diagrams seal several times. It was no wonder that the nine-tailed fox hated him so much. The nine-tailed fox turned its fierce eyes to the other two, and its huge head approached. Jiraiya remained calm. "Nine-tailed fox, this should be our first meeting." The nine-tailed fox just glanced at him, then ignored him, and directly past him and turned to look at the deer man. Jiraiya, the deer man and the nine-tailed fox stared at each other, then raised his hand and placed his 5 fingers on the nine-tailed fox's approaching nose. "Little fox, only good children can get candy." As soon as the words fell, the pupils of the nine-tailed fox shrank instantly, and it bit the deer man to pieces with an extremely angry mouth. At the same time, Jiraiya and Minato were also smashed to pieces by the angry nine-tailed fox's claws. The environment changed. Jiraiya and Minato both looked at the deer man. How dare this guy say such words to such a big nine-tailed fox? In the distance, Kushina, who had transformed into a half-tailed beast, had long lost her mind. She was controlled by the irritable nine-tailed fox, and waves of fierce aura continued to surge out. The deer man's clothes fluttered, and he raised his hand to press the mask on his forehead, muttering to himself, "Before, you said you would beat me away. Haha, after all, we are acquaintances. So why not be gentle? What are you mumbling about?" Jiraiya glanced at the deer man next to him and showed off, "Boy, open your eyes and look clearly. You will regret it if you underestimate me. I am the hero." Jiraiya, after shouting, he also posed a pose that he thought was cool. Jiraiya, who had been suppressed for a long time, finally found the time to show his power. At this moment, the runaway Kushina took the lead, took a deep breath upwards, and then opened her mouth to spit out a cannon of air. The transparent ripples that were almost visible to the naked eye plowed deep grooves in the ground and headed straight for the 3 people. Jiraiya wanted to let Dearman see how powerful the hero was, so he quickly formed a seal, the story of hero Jiraiya. First round, Earth escape, Earth. Dearman twisted his waist, took a stance, and finally punched out fiercely. Bang! The explosion in the air was extremely deafening. The terrifying air cannon exploded into circles of aftermath, which spread out in all directions with a fierce wind. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.